Welcome to the Payload Forward podcast. My name is Dr. Matthew Leavenworth, founder and director of Payload Forward.
And welcome to the Humble Warrior podcast. My name is Alani Bankhead. I'm a candidate for the United States Senate to represent the great state of Montana.
At Payload Forward, our mission is to build compassionate communities for the at-risk and underserved through mentorship. This podcast is one way we live out that mission. Alani Bankhead is a third-generation military veteran who served more than 20 years in the United States Air Force. Her work included counterintelligence investigations, human intelligence operations alongside special operations targeting terrorist networks, and service as the senior bodyguard to a top Pentagon official. She later led investigations into human trafficking and child exploitation and worked with law enforcement teams protecting vulnerable children and families. Now she's running for the United States Senate here in Montana. The world needs better leaders, and Alani Bankhead is one of them. All right, we are officially live. Alani, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. I am so stoked. I love your mission, and it's just a really big honor to get to collaborate with you today.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm just excited to have this. We just connected very, very recently, and we've proposed a fairly novel idea here. This is going to be a dual podcast. So we're going to release it on my stream as well as yours.
Yes, it's going to be so good. I have a young Helena native who's producing my podcast, and she's so excited about this.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so fantastic. Well, let's just start off, and maybe you can tell the listeners just a little bit about you, what you're doing, about the campaign that you're in right now, but even a little bit just about your background.
For sure. I'm Alani Bankhead. I'm running for U.S. Senate to represent the great state of Montana. I am a retired lieutenant colonel and special agent with the United States Air Force. Obviously, my views are my opinion and don't reflect my agency. Legal disclaimer. So I've spent my career hunting terrorist spies and child sex traffickers all over the globe. I've done operations on every continent except for Antarctica. I was a senior Pentagon bodyguard. So I was in all the rooms in Capitol Hill, the White House, Parliament, all the most senior levels of government. And I'm running for Senate because I did not make the sacrifices that I did in deploying and being shot at and bombed and all the trauma so that my neighbors could suffer and not put food on the table or struggle to put a roof over their head. We are the richest country in the world, and what's happening right now is insane. And I was looking around a while ago, kind of somebody's got to come save us. And then I realized that's me. I have the skill set to be able to help. And I've never been involved in politics before, but America is worth the fight and worth the sacrifice again. So that's what brought me here.
There's two parts of that. One is that your history is a career of sacrifice, and it's a career of defending our nation at really the highest level, nationally and internationally. And that comes with a set of ideals that we ascribe to, right? And most of us have a kind of a sense of what the American ideals are. And I think a lot of us are very, very concerned about that right now. We're looking at this moment in history and saying, we're not reflecting who it is that we say that we are. And I love this, and I just want to keep coming back to this because I did a podcast with Penny Ronning, who I know is, both of us look up to her, think very, very highly of her, as does anybody who knows her. But she kept asking this question of who we are as a moral people. And I think that there's multiple questions there: who we are as a political people, who we are as a nation, but who we are as a moral people also is a fairly profound question. And then the second part of that too is that in this moment of national crisis, maybe international crisis, people are like, we're scared, we feel helpless, and we're looking around. Somebody needs to do something about this. And then for a few of us, myself included, at some point you got to look in the mirror and say, that's me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because when I was in the rooms on Capitol Hill, I obviously heard everything and I saw everything. And what I learned was the people that are elected into those offices, the vast majority of them are really no different than you and I. You will get the occasional brilliant Condoleezza Rice or a Colin Powell or someone of that caliber, but the only difference I discovered between them and us is that a lot of them think that they deserve to be there, and people like me don't. And that really started shifting my perspective. I was in that job until 2016. And I think that was one of the breadcrumbs that brought me here, right? Is no, we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And so often we think that our legislators are a different cut from us. And so when I talk to people throughout the campaign trail and they say very humble things, right? Oh, I'm just one person and I want to help, but I'm only able to offer $5 or this little bit, or I can only share your profile, right? I don't think people fully recognize the power that that is. And that if folks realize that your humility is actually the key to you fully unleashing a power that is bigger than any one of us. That's been a big message for me. And nobody's more humble than Montana. The most hardworking, most humble people will give you the shirt off your back. And that's part of why I'm running too. So I'm not from Montana. I am third
You're from
generation.
everywhere.
I'm literally from everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yes. So I'm third generation military. I moved every 1 to 3 years my entire life until we moved to Montana. And so between service as a kid, I was active duty for 12 years. I married active duty. I just retired last month. I've been to, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm really able to say whatever I want now, right? Because we're beholden to the UCMJ. But I've been to over 80 countries. I've lived all over the United States and overseas. There is no culture like Montana leadership culture. It's very special. And I say that because not only are Montana values focused on hard work and community and family and freedom and live and let live and common sense, to the average Montanan who was born and raised here, who maybe doesn't get out as much as I do, this is normal for you. This is not normal for the rest of the world. And there's a reason why Montana has hit national news with the Nasty Nine and also with the bipartisan fight against the big, beautiful bill sale of public lands. It's not because it was a slow news day. It's because there's no other state in the country that comes together to protect what Montanans really care about. That's the set of values I want to take to DC. And so that's what this campaign is all about, is about letting every Montanan know how valuable they are, how their perspective and their experience matters, and join the campaign if you feel so led. And then we can take that experience and create better policy and law to support Montanans.
I love that your journey has led you here. To me, Montana is a sacred space. I'm also not a Montana native. I've been here for about 15 years. And my heart was just called here. Probably from the day of my birth, man, it was a one-way track to get to Montana just because of the independence and the wildness and the beauty of this state. And all of those things, too, you said about, I'm from Billings, and Billings is just so blue-collar and down-to-earth and hardworking. And to be honest, I like it a lot better than Bozeman. Just because of those qualities that to me are, and don't say anything there. You got to get yourself elected. I don't. I should also introduce all of these podcasts with those caveats of nobody's electing me personally. I don't.
You're biased. Totally
I don't
okay.
represent Russ Cleveland. I don't represent Alani, but have some strong opinions. But one of them is that Montana is just the greatest state in our nation. It's the essence of maybe some kind of an American ideal of freedom and adventure and all of those things. That's still so alive here.
Oh, 100%. So it's interesting to me because with all the struggles happening, oftentimes I'll try to help folks remember who we are as a state, right? When you look at the history of the state, we had the native tribes that were here, and then we had these settlers who were fleeing circumstances that weren't good, not knowing what was waiting for them on the other side. There is no better Montana or American spirit than Montana, right? Everything about the Irish settlers, everything that came after that, we are the best of the United States. And I'm not saying that just as a talking point. I'm saying that because it's 100% true. The down-to-earth nature. I'll just give you a really small example of how much it means to my husband and I that we get to live here. We've lived all over the world, right? We would be walking around our neighborhood, waving to people driving by, wouldn't get a wave back. And we're sitting here kind of, hey man, I'm not trying to be your best friend. We're just saying hello. Within 10 minutes of us pulling into Helena, our neighbor came over with beer. They were saying hi, and immediately we knew it was confirmed.
It's beer, not a pie.
Yeah, I know, right? But that was the type of community that we were seeking. And I think that's the type of community that the rest of America seeks too. And even though things feel polarized now in Montana, I do get that commentary a lot from folks where they say, oh, it feels really polarized. And I know it has been compared to previous decades, but there's no state that better meshes, red and blue. It's a very purple state at heart
Is
for a reason. And that's what we want to elevate is bring back those common sense ideals and values and mesh with the hard work and the community and all that stuff. But without a doubt, it's a magnificent place to live. And we have to fight hard to preserve that because it's being threatened right now.
There's so much to unpack there, and we promise not to go on too many rabbit holes. Even the history of Montana is complex, just like the history of our country. If you know the history of Sacrifice Cliffs, that's a tribe that was wiped out by smallpox, and the last warrior rode his horse off of the cliffs that overlook our city, and so there's complexity there. And oftentimes, I think that the realist things represent the best and the worst in us. And I think that's what I love about Montana is it's very real. In a lot of ways, your story, even though you're not a native of much of anywhere, is truly a Native American, like an American story that is native. And I mean that because like you were raised in the army, right? Like you went where your nation called you to go. And so you saw everything and you saw everywhere. And then there's something that pulled you back here. Personally, as a 15-year Montana resident, I don't know if I get native status yet, but I just want to welcome you to Montana. I'm so glad and you're not allowed to leave now.
Oh, no, we're definitely not leaving.
Yeah.
So,
Alani, and I want to hear truly your story. That is the purpose of this podcast is about stories and who our leaders are and what the reasons are that they decided to step up, especially in our time of need. And there's so many people stepping up right now and answering the call. And we got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. But just because of your experience, I want to ask you about just maybe your take. And you're running for a national office, so this stuff is very, very relevant to the conversations that you'll be having when you win. And so I also think that we live in a sort of post-truth world. Nobody knows what to believe anymore. And there's so much AI-generated content. There are some last refuges of truth. I actually think the podcast is one of those places. Like it's really, and to me, it's I want to see, it's one of the ways that we can fight back because there's something authentic and two people just sitting down and really working through hard stuff together. And that can't be fabricated very easily. And so much else can. A soundbite clip on social media, all of that stuff. You have to be skeptical of all of it, but not necessarily a podcast. And so that's what this particular podcast is for. But also just with your personal experience, I want to ask you what's going on in Iran and what's your perspective on it and what should we know? I don't know if you've been to Iran, but I know you spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And so maybe just take that away because I don't know what to think. One thing is clearly I think Iran, the leadership was really, really authoritarian, certainly immense human rights violations. Yeah, I don't think anybody's all that sad that leadership regime is gone, but the way that it was removed is very problematic. Certainly, even as somebody who's only as knowledgeable as I am, have enormous concerns about our declaration of war and the fact that it was not something that Congress was consulted on and seemed pretty unilaterally decided by one individual, those are the marks of authoritarian states.
yeah, okay. This is a great topic. And I'm really glad that you brought it up. And I agree that it is so difficult to figure out who's telling you the truth, right? So I'll just preface it by saying I'm an investigator by trade. Our job as investigators is to provide the facts and let the individual interpret them as they are, right? So I'm going to share what I know. And if I have an opinion, I'll let you know that it's actually opinion, right? But I want to set the stage first with my background in the Middle East. In the federal agent world I was in, right? So I'm a retired special agent with the Air Force, and our jurisdiction is all Air Force people, places, and things. And we have to do all of the federal agent functions, including CIA, FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security. So anything three-letter, we have to do that for airmen. I deployed with special operations to Iraq for 6 months. I was a counterintelligence, human intelligence operative. So the people in the movies that you see with briefcases full of money and they meet with their informant in secret and they trade that money for intelligence, that's what I used to do. And I did it at the height of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So super dangerous stuff that we were doing. And we're literally taught to evaluate risk versus reward in terms of I'm actually meeting with Al-Qaeda informants a lot of the time. So these are dangerous people that I know have killed other people, but the information they could potentially give me is worth my life at the end of the day. And then I worked on the counterterrorism desk at our headquarters in Quantico. I also was the commander of the counterintelligence unit in Kuwait for a year. And this is the same unit that lost three F 15s last week that were shot down by the Kuwaitis. So, honestly, what happened last week was my worst nightmare come true. That year in Kuwait, anytime you're in the Middle East doing our mission, you're not sleeping. And the fear is always what attack is going to come, who's trying to hurt our soldiers, airmen, and sailors and our equipment and our bases, and how do we stop those attacks, right? So our job is to identify, neutralize, and exploit any counterintelligence, which is a terrorist or spy threat to our mission. So I have quite an extensive experience in that space. And what's happening in Iran is so bananas on so many levels. And I agree with you. And I will also preface by saying the Ayatollah was a bad guy, right? Without a doubt, their intelligence service was bent on acquiring nuclear capability. They hate Israel. They wanted death to Israel. And national security is complicated. I will say, just
But that doesn't
really,
necessarily make them that unique, especially in the area.
without a doubt.
You even look at what happened in Afghanistan. We went in there, Russia went in there, we went in there again. Yeah, and it's not looking better than it was when we
Right.
started. And the number of lives that have been lost, and almost always they're not the leadership. They're not it's
Right.
just the population. It's the women and the children that always pay the price for our destruction. And
Right.
if Afghanistan or even Iraq is a model for what it is that we're doing over there, we've failed pretty unilaterally for 40 some odd years now.
Without a doubt. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's what a lot of veterans are saying now, right? We're like, we did not learn the lessons the first go around, and hundreds of thousands of service members bear the scars that are invisible, some of them visible, right? Of that. And it's disheartening for us to see that our government hasn't learned from those experiences. Now, I'm going to oversimplify for the sake of conversation and saying the actual act of attacking Iran is illegal on two fronts. Number one, the Constitution says that only Congress can declare war on another country. There's different kind of executive orders that can come into play if a president has to take action like that, but there's time requirements on when they have to go to Congress. The point is accountability. That's how the founders set up the entire system so that no one person has unchecked power. Second, I have a master's degree in international relations with a national security concentration. And international law is not officially law. They're norms because there's no kind of higher. We have the ICC at the United Nations that tries to be that entity, but basically all nation states agree that there are certain rules in international law. So, for example, you can't attack someone unprovoked. And so we violated international law because even from what I've seen, Trump said that there was no imminent threat. And that's a big deal for me to say because when it comes to investigations and intelligence that I see news clips on, I don't like to comment on those unless I have direct access to the information because the media just doesn't get all the data points or they might misconstrue them, which is normal. It's a
They might be
24/7
responding
news.
to a singular data point, right? They
Exactly.
get one, they write a story on it, but that is not the 3,000-foot perspective necessarily.
Exactly. And that's why I'm really hesitant to normally comment on stuff like that. But because Trump himself came out and said there was no imminent threat, you're telling me you violated international norms, right? You're telling the country that. So there's that piece, and that's the legal piece, right? But what you brought up earlier with Penny is the morality of it, right? And this is where it gets a little bit nuanced because national security is very layered and very complicated. And it's actually an amoral concept, right? So I'm going to go back to prehistoric times, man roamed the earth. There were no countries. We could kill each other, we could pillage, and there was nobody holding anybody accountable.
Tribalism, yeah.
Right, tribalism. So then you had these little fiefdoms in Europe, and some lord said, hey, if you come under my authority, you're going to give up some of your rights. So you're not going to have the right to kill, destroy, steal, right? But I will give you protections so that you're not killed or stolen from, right? So it was a social contract. And those fiefdoms involved into nation states and now modern day countries. And the first
And John Locke wrote a series of essays about this that talk about the
Yes.
social contract, and they are
Yes.
foundational in why our country is set up the way that it is.
100%. I love that you brought up John Locke. It's nice to talk to someone who actually understands all this history and theory. The number one priority of a nation state is to continue existing, right? So anything that's a threat to the country, it's going to neutralize it. And it's not going to necessarily do it in the most moral way, right? Because when you're surviving, right? If let's say you're a parent who's starving and your child is starving, you're probably going to steal food if that's your only option. Is it immoral? Maybe, but you're surviving, right? So it's excusable in most people's minds to give your kid food, right? So that's number one. So national security is very amoral because the second priority it has is to provide its citizens with the best possible life it can. And so when we talk about, for example, the Iraq War, a lot of people are like, it was all about oil. But if anybody's complained about high gas prices, that's a great example of
Yeah.
governments exist to acquire resources so that its citizens can live its best life. So I love that, Penny, and you bring up that moral question because that's what we're faced with right now. It's what kind of a country do we want to be? Do we want to be a tyrannical country that just takes and doesn't collaborate or work for the greater good of folks? Or do we want to direct our legislators and our leaders to reclaim our moral kind of legitimacy in the space? And what does that look like?
Well,
That's part of what
well,
this
well, I mean,
campaign
just
is.
in respecting international law, which we're in clear violation of right now. And I watched the debate take off just around Venezuela. And is this a limited military action? We went in there and we removed their president. We didn't kill a lot of people. Not a lot of people died necessarily. But I was watching an interview by Rand Paul, and he's talking about what does the reciprocal of that look like if another nation came in and, without causing a lot of casualties, eliminated our president or extradited him for some crime or another. Now our president is clearly an international criminal, right? He's violating international law. And that would be a declaration of war. And in Venezuela, we tried to kind of like, oh, but this is an actual war, but that is not what's happening now. Like we are talking about it as if we are at war with Iran. Like that is the nomenclature that is being used. Nobody's evading the fact that we are now at war. And you think about what imperialism is, right? And imperialism is the blood that runs through history. So much of it can be ascribed to imperialism, whether it's the Roman Empire or the British Empire or et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we're looking at like right now. Like we are empire building. We are taking over nations, installing puppet governments to extract their resources. And that's going to happen. That's happening in Venezuela. We're already looking at Cuba. Certainly Trump has some kind of fixation on Greenland. And like, how many of these can we commit to before we're just like, okay, we're just an empire. We're no longer
Right.
a nation. And I think we may have already passed that line.
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that we're losing friends left and right. And I do want to remind folks, or maybe if folks are too young to have been born and experienced 9/11, but the world came to our aid in our worst days. And other countries sacrificed for the United States, their sons and daughters as well. And for us to be doing this and offending our best friends and neighbors and collaborators in justice is actually, it's almost more offensive to me because you don't leave a friend behind. That's how I feel anyway. And I'm very much a coalition builder. I believe that if we each offer our gift in community, we get better results more efficiently, cheaper together. It's a win-win-win-win for everybody. I don't understand why the world doesn't collaborate in that way more, but that's what we're trying to lead with this campaign, is that we have to do it better together. And with the empire building, unfortunately, you're totally right. The question is why? And there's a lot of theories floating around, like distract from the Epstein files, or they want to acquire whatever, whatever the theory is. The reality is that actions speak to who you are. And is this action in Iran who we want to be as a country? And I think the vast majority of Montanans and Americans say, no, we don't. This
Well,
isn't who we are.
there's two different central sort of moral ethos and two different worldviews almost. Like an imperialist worldview is might makes, and power is the ultimate determination of who gets what. And that's I can just take your country because I can, because I have more
Right.
guns than you do. Whereas this other idea, and that's so central in Payload 4, but it is this idea of a positive sum game, or that's more like game theory, that we can collaborate in ways that instead of fighting over who gets how much of the pie, we
Yeah.
just make more pies.
Oh,
And
yes. I love the more pie concept. I talk about that a lot because, again, if you're in Montana and you haven't left the country very much, you don't have the perspective of what it's like to live in another country that doesn't have access to the resources that we have.
mm,
And certain powers that be want you to think that there is limited pie, and that's just not true. America is the richest country in the world. And legislators make the rules based on what the people want. So the question now is, how much pie do we want to make? How do we want to make that pie? What flavor do we want? And how are we going to make it happen, right? Together. So, no, I absolutely love that perspective. And again, going back to this binary of is it all about power or can we collaborate? The Montana way is collaborating. It's
mm.
been that way for hundreds of years at this point. And it's common sense to us, right? And that's what we want to do is take common sense to DC. This goes beyond just representing Montana. DC needs Montana's values and way of life and way of thinking. It's the most common sense that I've seen anywhere.
So before moving off Iran, like, why are we there? What's going to happen next? And then when you get elected, what do you want to do to impact? Like, even I think of the War Resolution Act. I don't know if we should just pull all the money out. Like, we're in there now. And sometimes once you've started something like there, you have to finish it, regardless of whether it should have been started in the first place. So yeah, those kind of three questions: why are we there? What's going to happen next? Are we going to be there for a really long time? And then what do you want to do about it as a candidate?
Yeah, obviously I'm not in the administration's head, so I can't actually say why we're there. I think we're there for a combination of reasons. I think part of it is power acquisition. I think part of it is distraction from some other domestic stuff happening, specifically with the Epstein files and immigration. Historically, war is a way that administrations have been able to mobilize the American people because the American people are very patriotic, and nobody's more patriotic than a Montanan. Very pro law enforcement, very pro military, which we really appreciate. And frankly, as an aside, that relationship to me is so special because on my first deployment, I actually was talking to a NATO officer and he was telling me how lucky we were that we got tax-free money and all these benefits. And I was surprised and I was like, oh, you guys don't have the same thing in your country? I think he was from Norway or something. And he's, no, we don't. And I was just so blown away. That was when I realized how much love the American people have for the military. And it is pissing me off that the relationship between the military is being eroded between the actions in Iran, the National Guard deployments to US cities, which I believe is a violation of posse comitatus law as well. But at the end of the day,
Well, and just the horrible abuses of ICE in Minnesota. If you want to undermine trust in law enforcement anywhere and everywhere, that's the way to do it. Send a mob of thousands of masked, armed to the teeth men that have very little training and zero respect for anybody else's constitutional rights, and then just let them rampage through a city and let us all watch.
right.
The consequences of that are just truly undermining these things that are parts of who we are as Americans, that we have a respect for our police officers and we say thank you to our veterans who have served. But now it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Like, who to trust and
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think to finish answering your question, I think we need to come back to basics because first and foremost, America's struggling, Montana's struggling, and we need to put our oxygen mask on. Iran is complicated, and I agree. It's not as simple as just pulling out. We saw what happened in Afghanistan, and that was disastrous. But I am definitely pro taking funding away from Israel. And I don't want to give a blanket statement like that. I'd have to look at the data and the information. Ultimately, my priority is protecting and uplifting life, period. And I know that Israel's pretty hated in that region, but in terms of the offensive capabilities that they're using to create all this chaos, I absolutely. And I've worked with the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF guys, and Mossad. I love them to pieces, but we are at the point where we need to take that money back for America and for Montana. and address the conflict. Because for those who aren't familiar with kind of the instruments of power, we're taught in the military, we have different leadership schools. So I've been to all the leadership schools for the Air Force through the very senior colonel level. And we have four instruments of power. It's diplomatic, information, military, and economic. And the military instruments, the last one we should be using, right? We should always try to use diplomatic efforts or economic sanctions, or information's a big one, obviously, with social media, right? But I would start doing work to get us out of that, because unfortunately, we've already lost too many American lives. Those F-15s are estimated about $300 million total. How much medical care could that have funded? What could we have done with that money instead to support America right now? Because she's struggling. She's not prosperous right now. So it's less about being unhappy with what's happening in Iran and more about, it's not that I hate them, it's that I love Montana and I love America. And that's what we have to focus on first.
Yeah, I love that, to reemphasize. And there, we've had historically so many of these collaborative levers to pull on. That's what the UN is. And you're right, there's so many of these other mechanisms, and we were in negotiations. And it's all just baffling. And anybody who knows me, who's ever talked to me, knows that I want Trump impeached. I think he should be in prison. I mince zero words on any of this. Again, nobody vote for me. I'm not running for anything. These are my private opinions. But we had all of those mechanisms, and then we just pulled out of them. And now we're at war again in the Middle East. And to me, it's just overt incompetence, which is just who he is as a person. I think he is an antisocial person who just loves power and loves holding it over other people, and pulls out of meaningful negotiations and then just imposes this new lever that he can't wait to utilize, which is the military. And I'm watching that unfold and grow. And I don't think people with that kind of antisocial personality, I don't think there's a line where he gets enough power. He overthrows enough governments. And to me, that's terrifying, that that the leader of our country truly is somebody who is antisocial. And that to me is terrifying.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point. And again, it's layered, this conversation for me. So having been a service member, my commander in chief is the boss. I have to obey every lawful order that they give me. And so when the American people elected him both times, he was my commander in chief. And I was not going to have beef with that part of his job. Whatever the orders were, that's what we were going to do, because the American people decided they wanted him as their representative. But what he's been doing in Iran and with Minneapolis, to your point, so many things, so many attacks on our constitutional rights and liberties and the very fabric of who we are as a country. Without a doubt, I agree with you. He needs to be impeached. He needs to get thrown in jail. I have friends at the UN and folks that have worked at the ICC, and I'm like, get ready for Nuremberg. And that's going to be something that I'm going to work on, because the number one element of my campaign in terms of platform is accountability. I've held people accountable my entire career, because I was taught that when you have power and authority, you wield it with the highest levels of integrity and excellence. That's part of the reason why the US military has been so successful, because we have an incredibly high standard for our folks. But we need accountability, right? We're human too. And someone needs to be policing every single one of us. And unfortunately, I think we're here as a country because a lot of little things that weren't held accountable forever ago have compounded. And now we're in a space where people are just doing whatever they want because nobody wants to have a hard conversation. And that's not me. I have had so many hard conversations. I've put corrupt government officials in jail for child rape, child pornography, child sex trafficking. I have had drag out fights with law enforcement leaders because they were operating out of ego and corruption more than they were in the best interests of their communities. And even with the press, right? The press, I always say, is like the unofficial fourth pillar of accountability for government, because when they report on things, they're the ones that are letting the community know, this is what your leadership is doing. Do you like it? Do you not like it? So I have always collaborated with journalists as much as possible and sharing what we're doing. And I had bosses that fought me on it, right? Law enforcement generally is like arm's length with the media for good reasons, right? If you have a journalist that isn't reporting the facts, right, and they're putting their skew, like it sucks. But at the end of the day, for me, it's more important that the community be told what we're doing so that we can get that feedback. And most
Mhm.
importantly, because they need to know that we care about, in my case, I'm a child sex crimes expert, right? I want them to know that we're working in coalition together to better protect their kids. I want the bad guys to know we're doing this and I'm going to come find you and I'm going to hold you accountable. So this all comes down to accountability. And unfortunately, now it's grown so big that we're really suffering as a country and as a world. And that's why we're just inviting people into these kinds of conversations to say, hey, I'm raising my hand to hold government accountable. Will you join us? Because this is going to end really badly if we don't do it now.
And the conversation that we're having right now is such a fascinating conversation to me because I also want to ask you about the Epstein files and specifically because you have these levels of expertise that I've never been able to talk to anybody that has worked in the capacity that you have, that has the training, that has been in those places. But to me, it is this issue of accountability that we have utterly lost control of it. And it's not to say that there hasn't been plenty of corruption in plenty of previous administrations. To me, it's just it started top down where Trump, when he came in 2016, it's just demolished levels of accountability, even to just basic being accountable to telling the truth. Like he still just loudly proclaims that 2020 was stolen from him, in spite having just no, and that's just one of, and then he founds a social media platform called Truth Social. Like he is a pathological liar, and he posts truth. The ironies, and that just has pervaded every level of our system. And I even think of Christine Nome finally being removed from office, but and thank God. But it wasn't accountability. It's just that she caused so much chaos and caused his poll numbers to drop that he removed her. It's not, there was no other reason whatsoever. It wasn't that she spent $200+ million on an ad campaign featuring herself that I could have just generated with AI pretty easily. Like I could just, you give me like $20 and I'll put together a better ad campaign than that. And or her flying all over the country in 200 million. This is the swamp. Like we are now, and we have just let the swamp creatures. And I think that's why people hired Trump in the first place, because he said he was going to drain the swamp. And it turns out that he is just a monster from another swamp, and a far worse monster as well. And so these systems of accountability have collapsed in ways where it's just, even just basic facts are now the terrain of debate. And so it's hard to know how we can come back from so many of our systems of accountability just being demolished.
Yeah. And I love that you said that for a lot of reasons, but also because I think the solution is to build bridges, right? And I agree with what you're saying, but the reality is that the numbers show he does resonate with a third of the population, and they are just hardcore Trumpers. And I'm not a psychologist. I've done some reading on this. I'm not an expert on the psychology of someone who follows Trump, but what I know to be true based on my analysis is they're in a lot of pain, and they feel very ignored, unseen, forgotten. And here comes this man who's screaming all of their inside thoughts about anti DEI, anti women, anti whatever. And they can get behind him because all he said was, I see you, which is one of the most powerful things that you can do as a leader, is to help someone feel seen and heard. And I think what's happening right now with America is the question of what kind of representation do you want? And how do we start healing America? And as awful as the administration is, I actually think it's unearthing some unhealed stuff that the intent is so that we can put some disinfectant on it and really start to address these core wounds. And I think in terms of moving forward, having these conversations is critical. And on the accountability side, starting small. So when you talked about the desire for power, the lust for power, and it being never ending, or the lack of accountability for Epstein. When people ask what they can do about that, right? They're like, this Epstein thing's so massive. I'm just one person. What can I do? And I tell them it's really easy. If you see someone saying something inappropriate, you call them to the carpet.
Mm.
If you see someone touch someone inappropriately, you call them to the carpet. If a pastor is reported to have done something, you believe that victim until the truth is discovered and you can adjudicate
Mm.
one way or another.
And you've
But
been a part of those kinds of investigations as well.
oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
So my history with that is I started in 2009 timeframe in Japan. So I started the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force mission in northern Japan. We have an Air
Mm.
Force base there. I worked with the Japanese National Police on trafficking cases. And actually, at the time in Japan, distributing child sex abuse material, which is the proper term for child pornography, it was legal to possess it but not distribute it in Japan, which is
Mm.
super crazy in 2009, right? But that's one of the things that has come up as a theme, by the way, a lot, which is part of why I'm running for office, is because legislation takes so long to catch up to the reality. But anyway, so Japan, I
Which
started.
just there, penny running has done more to move legislation forward in our country, in our state, than anybody that I know of
She's
specifically.
incredible. She's incredible. Guys, if you don't know Penny, you need to start following her immediately. She's an amazing human. But yeah, so I started in Japan and then worked cases all over the globe. Obviously, I was dipping in and out of like terrorism and command and some other stuff when I was active duty. And then left active duty at 12 years to go work at one of the biggest anti-slavery nonprofits in the world. And I was in charge of their South America child rape, child sex trafficking portfolio. So it was not only investigations, but training host nation law enforcement and prosecutors how to get better prosecutorial outcomes. And then from there, I was the alternate commander for the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force in Hawaii. So that jurisdiction covers Hawaii, American Samoa, the Marianas Islands, and Guam. So all the American territories in that ocean. And I started all the large scale operations. So the To Catch a Predator operations that everybody knows about, I started those. And the operations would be between 50 and 100 agents,
Lonnie, I have
investigators.
so much gratitude right now. I'm just like experiencing this, the children that you've protected, and I don't know, like the work
Yeah.
that you've done, boy, it's
Yeah.
just so powerful and inspiring. I just
No,
thank you.
thank you so much. Been an honor to serve the most vulnerable. I have always hated bullies from a young age, and to me, that crime is the most offensive possible. But I have to be honest, the success that I have on paper was because myself and a crew of less than 5 people cared and we wanted to do something about it. And we didn't know what we were doing either. We were investigators or analysts or whatever it might be, but we looked around and we're like, nobody's doing anything about this. Let's try. And it was scary. It was so scary. Literally before every operation, and I've done dozens and probably maybe even close to 100 operations at this point. But I'm terrified. I want to throw up. There were times where I'd be like, I'm the boss, I can cancel it. And I just share that because when you're operating aligned with who you're supposed to be, it's scary to do these things. And that's a lot of what I see in these conversations that you and I are talking about, whether it's holding your government accountable or protecting kids.
Or
A lot of
standing up
people,
and fighting when you're worried about the world around you. Alani, I
right?
think it's almost, I've just heard you say it over and over and over. If I could summarize your campaign message, it's almost like calling people to care, calling people to stand up, like now, like
Yeah.
right now, to
Yeah.
take responsibility for this. And then there's a number of others, and because we're going to tell your story, and that's the part that's the best part of this podcast. I do want to talk about these topical issues, just because I think this is an opportunity, even for me on my end, to talk to somebody who actually knows, actually has
Totally.
real world experience in this terrain, where I'm trying to research, trying to understand what's going on in our world, but it's so obfuscated by just the fact that we're in this sort of post-truth reality where there's just too much information and too much of it is bad.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And in the anti-exploitation space, it is a layered conversation too, right? And it's so offensive that unlike terrorism or drugs or fraud or any of the other crime sets I've worked, this was the one that a lot of people don't want to hear about. And I understand why, right? When I was younger, at first I was really offended. I'm kind of like, why? Like, I'm giving a free talk on child sex trafficking. Like, why wouldn't you want to listen? And now that I have more maturity and experience, I'm like, oh, no, I get it. And I think people are built for certain missions. And frankly, there are not very many of us that can handle this space. I always tell people, so I have a leadership business and about half my portfolio is training justice systems, so law enforcement, prosecutors, judges around the world, on how to better work child sex trafficking and child rape cases. But without a doubt, if I can keep an investigator for 2 years, it's a miracle because it's such a high burnout rate. It's so
Just the
offensive.
moral injury is
The
so
moral
high.
injury is so high. And even I'll get guys that come in and they're stoked. They're like, man, I've been trying to get to this unit for years. And within a couple months, some of them will be like, I'm so sorry, I can't do this. And I totally don't fault them. And we'll transfer them to another office. But I think it's estimated there's probably less than 200 experts on this space in the United States because people just don't stick around that long. And 2 years is nothing in terms of experience, right? At 2 years, you're kind of sort of figuring out what the space looks like. So we constantly have a churn of new people who are really excited, really want to be part of the solution. And then the moral injury, the PTSD, the burnout. And that's a reality, I think, to your point, that a lot of folks aren't aware of. And that's why when people get frustrated about where we are with that, you've got a combination of that situation. And then you have the powerful with all their money and power and resources, and they can make it go away because you have folks that might be inexperienced doing the best they can, but being intimidated and I need this job. And right, there's a lot of pressure there. And yeah, it's really, really awful. But folks like Penny and I, and so many other amazing humans, Matt,
So
truly,
many.
I wish you guys could be a fly on the wall when we do these operations because it brings me to tears seeing these amazing people give up their weekends, family events, all because they love their communities so much. They want to seek justice. Like I remember being in the command post, getting radio comms at 3 a.m. from the guys. And they're like, we're not leaving until you tell us to leave, Alani. We'll literally go 24/7, 365 to find these kids. And that's what people don't see on the news, right? So unfortunately, we are under-resourced, we're underfunded, everybody's burned out, especially post-pandemic. The number of cyber tips, so the leads that we get from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that tell us about potential threats to kids have exponentially blown up. And it's really hard right now. And again, that's why I want to be part of that solution. But to your point with power, I've put corrupt people in jail and I'm not scared to do it. And I'm not scared to die for this country either. People tell me all the time, they're like, aren't you worried they're going to come kill you? I'm like, honey, I signed my life away 25 years ago. I'm pretty good at defending myself, pretty good with a gun. But this is all about America, and it's about rallying folks to offer what they can. And maybe you don't want to offer your life for the country, and that's okay. But you can call out bad behavior in terms of pornography addiction, inappropriate language, right? Whatever heebie-jeebies you get, just do something.
Tell somebody.
Tell somebody.
And I love this. So even though we're having this sort of really high level conversation, we're talking about things that are just almost in outer space in comparison to like what you're saying, though, that is in your world, in your life right now, in your campaign, in your community. There are things that you can do right now that can take some of this power back, that can take some personal responsibility and go do. And some of these things are just like loving your neighbors, and some of these things are just being kind to people around you. And there are so many areas where you do have control and you do have power. And if all of us mobilize, maybe we can turn back the tide. And I think it is the tide right now. Like this was one of the points I want to talk to you about in a little bit as well, is that this is kind of our Jonah moment. We talked about that a little bit, that neither of us had any interest in getting into politics. And yet here we are, and I'm fully invested in Russ's campaign and all of our leaders who are stepping up right now and answering this call. And you're certainly one of those. I want to talk about Epstein, and then we'll get off of some of these subjects and talk about the stuff that's really the good stuff. But I want to propose a theory, and this is just me cobbling together the information that I have access to and trying to use critical reasoning to try and understand what's going on. And you can pick it to pieces or tell me if I'm right or whatever it is. But what it looks like to me is that it's almost like a secret society or something like that. And Epstein was the procurer of the entry fee, or something like that. I think we've portrayed him as a pedophile, and that certainly is appropriate. He certainly was that. But it had a lot more to do with just the reality that if I can get you to sleep with a 14-year-old, I own you. And to me, but it was more of, you do that once, and then I just own you forever. But then it's an invitation into this cabal, you can call it whatever it was, but this elite forum of people who have their hands on the greatest levers of power in the world. And you could go to his private island and maybe sleep with 22-year-olds and 20. You don't always, but like this, it's this mutually assured destruction. And so he created a system where all of the players he had so much leverage over each other that there's almost an absolute loyalty. And then you go into Ghislaine Maxwell and her father and the ties to Mossad, and nobody can tell how Epstein got all of this massive fortune that he acquired. Like, it's so obscured. And then he's operating through this entire process. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, but it's an arms dealer who just operates with impunity, but he gets arrested. Somebody like you finally puts him away, and then he just gets released from prison because he's too important to too many people. That's the end of the movie. And it's just like devastating because you like in the movie, he's like selling arms, and then the people just across the river are getting annihilated. And the crimes are so horrifying and obvious, but then and I think that was the sense of impunity that Epstein had. And so I don't actually know that it was about kids. To me, it was just about levers of power. And that's what I feel like I'm looking at. And also when Trump says that he was great friends with Epstein for 15 years, and some people say that Epstein liked women as much as he does, and some of them are on the younger side. Like, that 15-year period was when Epstein was honing his craft. And I'll say one last thing, and then I'm just going to hand this over, and you can tell me where I'm wrong. But I hate watching this stuff, but I was trying to prepare for some of these conversations, and there's a mini series on Epstein on Netflix, and he would have these girls over, a lot of them from Mar-a-Lago, and just have them give him these intimate massages. So these are like 14, these are kids, right? And they would undress and just give him a massage, and then he would turn over and masturbate in front of them or something, or just push the envelope as much as he could. And to me, that wasn't an act of sexual desire. That was him seeing how pliable those young women were and whether or not they could be used for the next part of his plot, which is to gain leverage over other people. And that's to me, it isn't like that complicated. That's what it looks like. It's a massive honey trap for billionaires on a private island. And I don't know, that's what I'm seeing. And I'm just curious, as somebody who actually knows the inside of some of those systems, what is going on.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a massive amount of information out there, and folks are still trying to sort through it, and everybody's got their ideas on it. I'm going to be really honest and say, with Epstein, I don't focus too much on the why behind it. For years and years and years, when I was a little girl, my parents had this encyclopedia of World War II books from Time Warner. And I used to read these books over and over again. I actually bought a copy last year on Facebook Marketplace here in Helena. And I just felt like it was this very serendipitous moment, because what I realized was little Alani was trying to answer the question of, why do people do things like this? And I came to the realization some years ago. I was like, oh, because they can.
Mm.
Right. So often as moral people, you want to have a really good reason why, right? It's a honeypot, or they want to take advantage, whatever. Like, when it comes down to brass tacks, it's because they can.
Mm.
Right. And so what I see is, and I'll give you an example with regards to child sex abuse material cases that we work. So this is the distribution of child pornography. But there's a spectrum of abuser. And there's some that are pathologically wired for that kind of crime, but it's a really small number, actually. The vast majority are crime of opportunity. It's porn addiction that went wrong. They have to go more exotic, and then they end up in these places. As part of my operations, we do offer a polygraph. And we do get some folks that the polygraph shows that they were right, in terms of course, they come in with the whole, I've never done this before. And if the polygraph comes back clean on them, for me, I'm like, this is a wake up call from the universe that you need some therapy. But when we're talking about the Epstein class, that is another level of power. And my theory is it's because they can, right? They already have all the money and power in the world that they could ever want, but they're not happy. They're not feeling good. So then, of course, the human body's, what do I need to do or acquire to feel good? And this type of crime is the ultimate in power abuse and resource acquisition, because humans, It's not like a drug where you take it once and it's gone. Humans can be exploited over and over and over again. So that's my theory on that. There's some other stuff floating around about he was working with the CIA to do these honeypots, which the CIA obviously has a history of all kinds of abhorrent behavior in the name of national security, which we already talked about is actually amoral. So from a CIA perspective, a lot of the times what they say is, we do what we have to do to secure our borders and make sure our people are good. And it might be unsavory, but that's why we don't tell you about it. Abu Ghraib is another example of where we abused our moral authority as a country. But ultimately, what I focus on is the behavior and the impact. And it's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 10 boys, depending on the study that you look at, is abused in America. And I ran the numbers once. So it's between 68 and 75 million Americans are survivors of these crimes. And that is the biggest army the world has ever seen. Right. And so I share that because to your earlier point of do something, do anything, right? Survivors for me, and like this is my internal voice coming out. I've always just wished for survivors to come together, even if you got 1 million, like that's such a small percentage, right?
Force, though.
But what a force, right? But I'm what we call trauma informed in this space. When these heinous crimes are committed against people, you're taking people's agency and power away from them, right? So as an investigator, my job is to give as much power and agency back, which means everything I do, all my questions, my behaviors are geared towards giving them a choice. So rather than saying, tell me what happened to you, I'll say, hey, if you feel comfortable, would you be open to talking to me? If not, it's not a big deal. It's whatever you need to feel good, right? If you want to seek justice, I'm here. If you want to heal and be done with this, no problem. And so I will never push survivors on that point. But since we're talking about it openly, the biggest army the world has ever seen, I'm always like, guys, what do I have to do to band you together? And actually, one of the things that we're doing with the campaign is money talks, money's energy. And we're doing a symbolic $1, right? So if you're a survivor of these crimes, you don't want to be involved. You don't want to be out in public, which totally get completely. You're right. Look at how the Epstein survivors are being treated, by the way. Super awful. But this symbolic $1 to the campaign, just to say, I believe in me, right? As a survivor, I believe that I have value. And I'm committing that, right? Just for me, not even for the campaign, but as an individual, because my whole life has been about protecting and uplifting life. And it breaks my heart that so many survivors are told through the actions of these powerful people that they don't matter, right? Treat someone that way, you're taking their humanity and saying, you're an object, you're not even a human being. And that's disgusting to me. Now we're starting to cultivate a toolbox of options for the listener, right? Whether you're a survivor or not, whether you want to get into politics or not, it's really about what feels best that you want to offer to Montana and America as a whole that collectively we all can do. And I actually want to emphasize something you said earlier about you're like, be kind to your neighbor, right? We hear those things and it sounds cheesy, but to the listener, Matt is so spot on. It's not even funny. The miracles I've seen because somebody dropped a casserole off on someone's stoop, right? Where later on that person said, I literally had no idea how I was going to eat that day. I was really struggling and you gave me faith in humanity that I matter to somebody and keep going, right? People coming up to me saying, oh my gosh, your smile, I was having the worst day and thank you so much for smiling at me because you just made me feel like I was a person that was acknowledged, right? What Matt is talking about with kindness and just offering what you can is so much more powerful than we all really realize. And I love that that's the point of the podcast, right?
And I love that, and I think that that's a great time to let's move this conversation in that direction, and even just a couple final thoughts on those issues. One is I think all of us are craving some kind of insider's knowledge. There's this like our pattern recognition systems, like what on earth is going on right now in this world. And so I had this opportunity to ask somebody but ultimately it's that there is some darkness out there and it permeates our culture. And it's really tragic when it's at the highest levels of society, but it's also everywhere and it's all around us. And my background really is not in investigating stuff
Right.
like Epstein or like none of that stuff. Like I'm a mental health counselor and have worked with those little girls who have been trafficked and have spent hundreds of hours with them and gone to court with them and walked through what is just a generally pretty heartbreaking process.
Yeah.
And I think that at the highest level, and you're running for a national office, so that is part of your role is to go to our nation's capital and restore accountability even at the highest level. But I think that ultimately what your campaign is about, what this podcast is about, is loving your neighbor
Yeah.
and finding ways. And I just love that. I love how you phrase that as a form of empowerment. What can you do? What is
Right.
your heart calling you to do? And there's also, this kind of draws me back to one of our points, and there's a few of them. Imposter syndrome is one of your primary, like you just talk about it a lot. But another is that your calling is probably, and there's this quote by Carl Jung, what you need most is often found where you least want to look. And there's a Latin phrase, instruquilinius invenitur, that means that. But it's like that, what is calling you? And it's probably it's something that you're terrified to go and do. But all right, so there's that. So I want to talk about that, but I also just want to speak about who I'm talking to right now. And Alani, this is like these are some of my favorite things about you that I think you said 5'3" or something like that. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
five
yeah.
three.
And Hispanic, and these are self-described things that I'm saying, that you have a baby face and you feel this sense of imposter syndrome. And even as you've gone and prosecuted some horrible, horrible people, dangerous people, your heart has been beating out of your chest. Like you're not Superwoman necessarily, but have gone and done things that were courageous and unbelievably challenging. And that's where you've been called. And I love that. And also, like, even how you've described your appearance, your stature, it's also been the thing that has enabled you to be successful on the battlefield in some of these incredibly dangerous situations. So to me, those are the most exciting things that we're going to talk about today. And so maybe like riff off of that, but as far as imposter syndrome, as far as finding your calling and fear, and how
Yeah.
you found yours.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's so generous of you. Yes, imposter syndrome's my thing. So with my leadership development business, half the portfolio is the anti-child crime stuff. The other half is this imposter syndrome, which actually bleeds into all the law enforcement stuff I do as well. Because again, having traveled the world, and we work in human intelligence as agents, right? We're working with informants. So we get a lot of training on how to read people, how to manipulate them. And what I realized was it didn't matter what mission I was in, whether it was terrorism, child exploitation, fraud, whatever. The number one barrier to anyone's success or any team's success was the internal fear that an individual was experiencing. And so that's why my business is so focused on it, because I know if I can remove that fear impediment, yeah, then the magic really starts to happen. And my story is that the world told me I didn't matter because I was female, young, brown, and look, I'm very petite. And I believed that for a long time. And it was a lie that I chose to believe, unfortunately. And yet I always wanted to seek justice and protect the vulnerable ever since I was a little girl. And for the listener, I believe that everybody has breadcrumbs throughout their life that kind of take them to their purpose. And I know mine. I remember when the movie Newsies came out it was in the 90s, but I was a kid. And the movie, if you guys haven't seen it, it's a Disney movie. It's based on the true story of these orphaned newsboys in New York City who were being taken advantage of by the big news barons. And they did a riot and all this stuff. But anyway, I was like bawling. My parents are like, what is wrong? And I'm like, those poor kids, like those rich people took advantage. And I have so many of those examples where I can see clearly now that my purpose is protecting and uplifting life. And when I was about 10 years old, my dad was a professor at West Point, so the United States Military Academy. And there's an event called Beast. So Beast happens the summer before the freshman class officially comes in. It's your basic training at West Point. And it's grueling, it's awful, and it culminates in this, I think it's 12 or 13-mile ruck march. And the community comes and welcomes them back. They're celebrating, they're cheering on them. They're tired, they're sweat, they haven't showered, and God, I don't even know how long. And I remember 10-year-old me looking at these folks and I was like, they volunteered to sign their life away for freedom, I was like, who are these people and how do I become part of this? And that was a natural calling for me. And so that led to my military service. And I'll be honest, my resume on paper is impressive, but I really resisted every single job I ever got. Every time assignments called and said, hey, you're going to go be deploying with special ops. Hey, you're going to go be a senior Pentagon bodyguard. Hey, you're going to go be the commander of our unit in Kuwait. I was like, I'm 5'3". I speak Spanish and Portuguese. You must have the wrong file. And I was really a reluctant kind of leader, only because I felt unqualified for the work that I was called to. And so imposter syndrome is defined as the belief that you're not good enough or qualified for the job, the accolades, positive feedback, and that eventually people around you are going to figure out that you're not worthy of it. And when that happens, bad things occur. So you might lose professional esteem or respect. You might even lose your job, your livelihood. There's all kinds of wormholes you could go down with this, right? So what happens is people don't even try because they're scared to fail. And what I saw, my career was mostly very life and death situations, whether it was war or child exploitation or drugs, right? And a lot of the team members would really be scared to fully unleash their gifts. I could tell, not because they didn't want to, but because if I mess up this child pornography case, a suspect continues to perpetrate the crime, a victim continues to be victimized. And so I don't want that responsibility because that's scary because I don't feel good enough. And so what I learned over time was actually what I thought were my weaknesses were the key to making the magic happen. As an example, when I was in Iraq doing my counterintelligence terrorism stuff, I realized that I could get into parts of the country that my white male counterparts couldn't access because I am brown, because I'm female, which it's an Arab country. They don't respect women as much. I'm very easily overlooked because of how I look. So that was a superpower for me. And I was able to get new informants that team hadn't had. I got the first new informant in 3 years for that unit. I was able to stop innocent people from being killed. I worked an operation where we stopped 3 suicide vest bombers from detonating. And all of that was not, it wasn't in spite of me. It was because of those attributes that I thought were weaknesses. Same thing when I was a senior Pentagon bodyguard. So in our world, we call that the PSO, the personal security advisor is who I was, the PSA. The PSO are like the other team members. So I had a team of PSOs. I was the PSA to the Secretary of the Air Force. And I remember when they called me, I was the commander in Kuwait for a year. My boss is 2 countries over in Qatar. And he's, hey, we want you to apply for this job. And I was like, you must be smoking crack, sir. Like I do not look like a bodyguard. I've never wanted to be a bodyguard. And he's, yeah. No, we know, like, we want you to apply for it. And it's not really an option in the military. You have to do it. So I apply for this job. I make the top 3, did not think I was going to get picked at all. Next thing I know, I'm leaving Kuwait a month early because they need me at the Pentagon to do this job. I'm in the schoolhouse doing advanced, basically Secret Service training. And I'm looking at the instructor asking, like, what the hell am I doing here? Because I was the only female bodyguard in that room. And my protectee was the most senior protectee out of all the people in the room, which made me the highest ranking person in the room. And so I remembered I was terrified beyond belief. And I had this angel of an instructor who told me, he was like, Alani, it doesn't have anything to do with your size or your strength. It has to do with how you use your brain to control the physical spaces you're in. So most of personal protection work happens before the event. So we do site surveys. We look for entry and egress points. Where's the AED? Let's talk to the manager. Get a list of people who's coming. If there's a threat present on that guest list, we're removing that person before my boss sets foot in that room. And actually, when I left that job, that same instructor called me and said, you're the only team that hasn't had any security issues or use of force issues in 2 years. And we think it's because of how you look. We think you have the element of surprise working in your favor. So nobody thinks you're the bodyguard. And I joke, I'm like, my trigger finger works just as good as anybody else's, right? So through that storytelling, that's what I use to try to help people understand when you are terrified of a mission, it means you're probably aligned with what you should be doing, because if you didn't care, you wouldn't be that scared,
Mm.
right? And so the question becomes, what is that voice telling you is the reason you're unqualified? And the top two are, I'm not smart enough and I don't have the credentials. So this is all the research I've done over the last 9 years of being in business. And I have examples. So for example, Virgin Atlantic guy, Sir Russell, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Really famous. He owned Virgin Records and
Russell
Branson.
Brand, yeah.
Yeah,
Branson.
Branson. Yeah. So he actually has dyslexia.
Mm.
And there was a study done on Fortune 500 CEOs, and they found a disproportionate number have dyslexia. And when they peeled the layers back on that onion, what they discovered was that challenge that that child had in learning how to read when they were young actually created a new framework in their brain that made them amazing fits for corporate CEO at the highest level. So when I'm doing these trainings, I say, hey, for those of you in the audience who have dyslexia, how does it feel now to know you're in the running to be a Fortune 500 CEO? Right? Now we flip the script on what you think is your weakness actually can really elevate all kinds of things. You just have to decide what you want to do and apply that.
Yeah, that those things that are often discarded or rejected are these things that I don't know, our insecurities actually are the keys to unlocking our superpowers.
Literally.
I love that. And I'm even thinking of what the title of our podcast is going to be. And I think it's something like a call to action, but it's like rise up and rise up where you feel called. It's something like that, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that there are all of these voices that have been so extinguished for so long and they're just waiting. And I think that's what your leadership is doing. Like you're telling people, come on. You want us
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
no, absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. And I'll go back to when we talked about Trump's administration actually bringing some uncomfortable stuff to light because it needs to be disinfected and set properly. But if you talk to any demographic, everybody feels discriminated against, right? Like I did when I was younger. White males feel discriminated against, people of color feel discriminated against, people with disabilities do. And I joke about it when I talk to folks because I'm like, who's doing the discriminating if everybody feels discriminated against, right? The point is to keep us divided,
Mm.
right? But when we can offer our little gift, despite whatever the internal monologue says is our limitation and why people discriminate against us, that is when the magic happens. So on the justice side, my team of five, so I'm thinking of one team in particular. Literally, it's the five of us going, nobody's doing anything about this. We have to do something. Like, it's scary, but we're going to try and see how it goes. And there could have been massive failure, like catastrophic failure. But the brilliance that these folks brought. So I had an Intel analyst, and they were all so humble. Oh my gosh, I love these people. But she came up with a way to positively identify our suspects 96% of the time before they walked out the door for the arrest, which, as a law enforcement officer, imagine when I go into an interview with a suspect, I know everything about them. I have images of their kids or kids they might have access to. I have all their social media information. That's power in the interview room to get the truth. And she came to me with Alani, I have a crazy idea. And all I said was, let's try it.
Mm.
And now that technique, I wish I could tell you in more detail, but it's,
That protocol.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's sensitive.
is
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it's being taught all over the United States now
Mm.
because she had the courage to say, this is crazy. It might fail, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's a risk, right? Your purpose is a risk.
100%.
Funny, so
Absolutely.
maybe you can tell this story. I hope you can. But you mentioned stopping three people with a bomb strapped to their chest. Can you tell that story? I
I
like that.
can tell that
Yeah,
story.
like the whole thing. I want to like CIA style.
Yeah.
Let's hear how
I
this
can
unfolded.
totally, I could tell the whole thing. We're trained, not only are we running the informants we have, we're always looking for access to new intelligence streams. And at the time, the 911 equivalent system had recently been set up in Iraq. And
You're in Iraq.
I was in Iraq.
Yeah, yeah.
And we would get these logs of the 911 calls that were coming in. And there was one particular person calling in that had some information that I was like, that is really interesting to me. I think that they have access to a lot more. I want to meet with this person.
So something's
And,
jumping out.
oh,
There's
yeah,
some piece of credibility here that's caught
100%.
your attention. Yeah.
100%. And so I go to my boss with my interpreter. We call them terps for short, right? So my terp and I go to the boss and I'm like, hey, boss, like, I want to go do this operation. I want to meet with this person. Now, everybody's seen the movies. There's a high risk of death. Right? Because you're meeting with somebody who's probably involved in terrorists and they may or may not hate you and they may or may not want to kill you. We also have double agent operations, right? So the enemy is always trying to infiltrate what you're doing so they can give you bad information or they can kill you. And actually, I had seen a stat that this is unverified, but I believe to be true. But my career field is the second highest in deaths after special operations per capita because we have agents die all the time at the hands of terrorists overseas. Not all the time, sorry. Too often is the point. But anyway, so there's this risk versus reward balance that you're constantly evaluating. And so for me, for the sake of conversation, my life was worth getting access to this information. And of course, we're trained on how to do surveillance detection and evade potential traps and stuff like that. And even though I wasn't sure how it would go, I thought that not only could I get the information, I thought that it would be a treasure trove of intelligence. And I'm all excited about it. I pitch it to my boss and he's no. And I'm just kind of, what? Why? I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I thought this through. And he's like, nope. And there's no more discussion. We're not doing this. So my terp and I leave the office and it's quiet for a second. And then my terp, who was so amazing, I think he said that because you're a woman. And I don't think he did not mean it like he was sexist. He was like, I think he's very protective of you. And I think he's worried you're going to get hurt. And he doesn't want to do that, which I really appreciated. But I'm not there to be safe. I'm there to save people's lives.
Yeah,
And
you signed up for that
right.
Just the way the men did. And
right, exactly.
yeah.
And I'm not flippant with my life. Don't get me wrong. Like, I fully believe that if I'm dead, I'm no good to anybody. So I'm not like taking crazy risks with my life. We are trained to the highest levels on risk versus reward, how to mitigate threats, like all this stuff.
Yep.
And my intuition was telling me this intel was worth it.
You remember what tipped your spidey sense off? Do you remember?
I just remember reading the log and being like, I need to talk to this guy. And actually, that's another point in counterintelligence. So often we want it to be formulaic and like a to-do list, but there's a lot of intuition in the intelligence space, right? How many times have you seen on TV where some cop gets interviewed and it's, how did you know where to look for that evidence? And they're like, something just told me to go look over here. And that's something that we don't harness enough, especially in the Western world. We really elevate thinking over intuition, unfortunately, a lot of times. But all that to say, so it was probably about a week or two later, we got another 911 log, and that same caller had called in, and the intel was even better. And my interpreter and I looked at each other, and I was like, let's just go. So we get in the car. Car. Yeah. And we're driving off base. And I just remember being like, if this doesn't work, I'm getting fired. Like, I knew I was going to get fired because I didn't ask for permission. And I sat with this informant for 3 or 4 hours. I got all this information, and we have to pass. It's like not only the intelligence, it's the geo coordinates, it's like vehicle information, right? Like whatever, like all the details that we possibly can, so that the target package can go to special operations and they can go neutralize that threat. And I get a call a few hours later from my boss, and thank God we were wrapping up the meeting, but he's like, where are you? And I was like, I just got some intel from that one source, and I gave him all the information because it was an imminent threat. So these 3 suicide vest bombers were going to detonate that day. And so I passed the information on to him. He's like,
so are you like in a semi-dark room, like in a stone hut? Like what? These are the images that are coming to my mind, entirely based on James Bond movies. I'm
gosh.
sure, but
That is so funny. Not a stone hut. Sometimes we have safe houses throughout whatever area we're working. Sometimes we're hiding in plain sight. I could put an abaya on, so the black head to toe covering, and I look like a normal person. And so sometimes we would meet with them. And there's a lot of detail that goes into operational planning. It's not just going out in a car and meeting somebody. It's you have to do a site survey, you have to do surveillance detection, you have to identify what your communications plan is, your
Yeah,
exit
but you
route.
went quick on this one though. Like
Oh
you went
yeah.
quick.
Oh,
Yeah.
I went so quick on this one. But I still did my due diligence to make sure that it was safe enough for us to go. But all that to say, I think we met in like a cafe somewhere, like it was a really public space. Because the other thing too is public spaces, people are less willing to pull a gun and shoot you. And we don't want them to know where our secret space is in case they are a double agent. So yeah, we were in a public space, but I get back and the special ops team
Also,
had,
just to say what a courageous person this was that you met with. And I don't know, was he like sweating? Was he, I can only imagine, right? He's like,
without a doubt,
like
without a
he's,
doubt.
yeah, he made a
Yeah.
decision that certainly put his life at risk to
And his
go
family. And his
protect
family. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good point that these people literally betrayed their countries
Mm.
for us. They put their families' lives at risk for us. And that's something on the refugee side. There's been a lot about getting rid of the visas for these interpreters and these folks that helped us in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I find so offensive because we promised them we would take care of them because they did everything. And a lot of them died for us. But anyway, that's another conversation. But so I come back and my boss reads me the riot act. He was like, "You did a good job. I get it, right? I should have let you do the thing." But he's like, "If you ever do that again, I'm sending you home." And I was like, "Okay." But I was also like, "But I need you to trust me. I'm good at what I do. I'm here to do a job. I need you to trust me." And that's part of sometimes negotiating with your bosses. And that was a massive risk that I was pooping my pants on the way out, not because I was worried about dying. I was like, I don't want to misrepresent my agency because it's a joint environment, right? So special ops, you have Air Force, Navy, Army, you have everybody there. And for me, it was more, I want to do a good job so people know that my agency sends the best. And I didn't want to get fired and be an embarrassment to my agency. So it was a very big risk professionally and to my life. But it's interesting that the scarier thing was I didn't want to embarrass my agency. I wasn't worried about dying.
Mm.
So yeah, that was, and you want to know what's crazy is Pastor Jeff Struker. So Jeff Struker is a retired Army Ranger and chaplain. He actually was in Black Hawk Down, like he's portrayed in the movie,
Oh, wow.
like finished Ranger stuff, transitioned to be a chaplain, massive like pastor, amazing human. I was on his podcast and he actually was one of the operators that responded to my intelligence,
Wow.
which was crazy. I was like, I
It's
can't believe
crazy.
it's been
On this
50,
particular
this
intervention?
op. Yeah, he was like, I remember that tip. And I'd never met him before. And it was just such a like crazy universe colliding thing where it was like 15 years later, I could sit across from someone that executed my intelligence,
So is
you know?
that is your side of the operation is you gained, audited the intelligence, and then you would have passed that information off to a special ops unit, and they would have gone in and taken those individuals.
Yes. So the way the intelligence field works is it's massive, first of all. And I worked human intelligence and counterintelligence. So human intelligence is, let's say China's, I want to look and see what's going on this Air Force base in Kuwait. They're going to go talk to people and try to get information. That's human intelligence. Counterintelligence is I'm trying to find the spy who's trying to collect information on us. And we have different ways that we can execute, but there's other forms of intelligence. There's geospatial intelligence. So when we have satellite units that map the globe and the geography can impact intelligence, right? Weather, for example, can tell us like if I need light for an operation, I want to go when it's a full moon, right? There's signals intelligence. So there's agencies sucking up all of our open source and otherwise signals intelligence. So computer communications, phone calls, social media, all that's being collected and analyzed. There's probably a dozen different types of intelligence fields and they all converge. And so we'll acquire all this information and send it to special ops for actioning. For example, I might talk to an informant and they're like, oh, I know where this senior terrorist is hiding. And I'm like, awesome. Do you have their number? And they'll give me their number. And then I pass it to the signals intelligence guys and they're geolocating where that cell phone is. You know what I mean? So it's a really big, really, really big operation.
Yeah, that's an amazing story.
Thanks.
Well, thank you.
I'm an open book. Whatever questions you
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
have. Yeah.
Well, I want to know where all of this came from. And so maybe tell your story a little bit from the beginning, from being a child on military bases. And I'm just like, even this conversation right now, your eyes are like sparkling and your smile, it's endearing, but also then to know in the background that you've gone and like, you've continuously said this and you've lived this out. So it's not like it's something you're just saying, but that you're utterly willing to put your life on the line for our country. And you're saying it with sparkly eyes and you're 5'3" and to me that's amazing. It's almost like the book and the cover, but as you said, that's been your superpower. But I want to know where that patriotism came from, where your sense of personal responsibility came from, and so maybe even let's just tell the story of growing
Yeah.
up and getting in your career path that got you to
Yeah.
this place.
Oh man, you're probably going to make me cry. So I'm Puerto Rican. My parents are both Puerto Ricans and they lived in poverty in Puerto Rico. And education was their path out of poverty, which is why education is one of my platform items. I believe everybody deserves good quality education for free in America. So my dad got an ROTC scholarship. He became a military police officer, and I was born in San Francisco, and that's how Alani came to be at the Presidio. So we had an army base there at the time. It's closed now, but
So the ROTC scholarship got him to San Francisco, and
yep,
brought him obviously a family,
yep.
and you were born in
Yes,
San
I
Francisco.
was born. Yep, I'm the eldest.
Mm.
And yeah, so I grew up in this environment. I'm third generation military. My grandfather served in World War II as well. Everybody in my family is either military, law enforcement, both, or married into it in some way. My husband is retired Air Force. He's also a special agent. We met in OSI, and he actually was an EPA agent here in Montana. So clean air, clean water violations is what he investigated. But even my dog, I have a dog who's a police canine. Lulu finds evidence in child pornography cases. So everything in my
Just down to the
world,
dog.
yeah, literally down to the dog. But I just grew up around these protectors of the community. And so this was the family business for me. And we would move every 1 to 3 years, depending on where the Army sent us. And I grew to really love it. I think you hear a lot of military brats hating that life, and it's disruptive, but I just loved culture and I loved meeting new people. And I just got the bug. I love to travel and stuff like that. And so then,
Was that a slow moving bug that you got just as you
no, it's pretty
traveled? And
instantaneous. It's pretty instantaneous, I
when
think.
when
Yeah.
did you know that you were made for this or meant for this path that your family chose?
It's probably like my earliest memories. I think I was about 5 or 6. We were stationed at Fort Benning in Georgia, and that's where the air assault airborne schools are.
Mm.
And so they'd have family day. And I, like little 5-year-old Alani, was like, I want to jump from the tower because they would let the families do the zip line off the tower. And my mom's not my sweet, pretty girl. And I'm like, I want to do that. And so I
So
just
you're a little crazy
always
from the get-go, yeah.
super crazy, super crazy. And even speaking of breadcrumbs, we were stationed in Panama. And this was actually during Operation Just Cause, which is the operation to get rid of Manuel Noriega at the time, who was a dictator in Panama. But I was a little girl, and you know how group projects, there's always people that don't pull their weight. So apparently, when I was in kindergarten, I had written a note to the group leader for this assignment because she wasn't pulling her weight. And it started with, to be a leader, you must be excellent. Like 5-year-old me was writing that.
Mm, love that.
And so I remember walking it to my friend's house, and her mom answered, and I was like, can you give this to Susie? Thanks. And I just left, and
You walked it over
I
to her.
walked it over. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Boom.
And I didn't know it at the time. The mom read the note, and then she and my mom had a good laugh about it. And my mom still has it.
Amazing.
So yeah, I just always felt a responsibility to doing the right thing. And my parents raised me that way. Everything was like, you have to be the best, not for the sake of being the best, but because people
Serve.
need your help. Yeah, it was all
Yeah.
about service. And then went to West Point, obviously. And I'm leaving a whole bunch of
Yeah.
locations out in the middle, but West Point was the next big breadcrumb of who are these people? This is amazing. I want to be part of this. And actually,
When you saw that the training and them coming
yep,
out of the woods and like
yep,
just seeing their dedication, and those are
yep,
that is a particularly hard. West Point is obviously one of the most exclusive and
super,
elite schools in our
super,
nation, and the best and the brightest go there. And saw
100%.
them coming back from
Yep,
there,
yep.
and yeah, I can imagine that making
Oh,
just a huge impression. How old were
yeah.
you when you witnessed that?
I was about 10 years old when that happened. And
This
actually,
deepening sense of leadership and purpose. All right, before we go on, I have to tell my favorite story about my wife. It's one of my favorite stories about my wife because Kylie is also just a strong, incredible woman. I just have this deep respect for not only my wife but just strong women who are standing up right now. I'm really tired of men in general. I'm almost tired of myself. We're just doing such a bad job right now that I'm just a little over it. Not I. I'm just joking. But anyway, when Kylie was maybe 4 or 5 or something like that, and we found this, it was also preserved in like the collection of the things that survived her childhood. And it was asked, she was asked like, what's your favorite part about school? And everybody recess, lunch, right? My wife wrote tests. She, she wrote tests at 5 years old. That's her favorite part. And she's an utterly brilliant physician and so has lived that out to its fullest, but she really liked taking tests.
oh my gosh. Okay, now I'm curious. What was it about the test that she liked?
Boy, I'd have to ask her. I think performance and
Okay.
pressure, and she just has some fire in her,
I
and she's so
love
just
that.
intellectual, and she's probably really good at them, right? So getting the highest
So
grade, and
good.
yeah, I
So
remember
good.
she submitted a paper, and the professor gave her extra credit, even though he'd never given anybody extra credit in his life. So that is my wife. She's phenomenal. But
Incredible.
yeah,
Love
yeah,
that.
and just so much respect for the strong
Yeah,
women who we are
yeah,
dependent on. And my wife is one
yeah,
of those. She's a physician, and she
yeah,
cares for people when they're sick and
yeah,
does it at the highest level. And okay, so we're
yeah.
10. There's West Point, and then your journey keeps going forward.
Yes. And one last thing on West Point. So in West Point, when you are a professor there or on staff there, you have the opportunity to sponsor cadets.
Mm.
Obviously, these cadets are living away from home, really hard circumstances. So to give them a break, there's a program where you can sponsor cadets and you just host them like for dinners, meals, like just get them out of the barracks and like a mental health thing. And so we sponsored, I don't know, gosh, probably 20, 25 cadets. So I spent those years being around the best leaders that the Army has to offer. And they further inspired me, right? Just seeing the high caliber, the intellect, the empathy, the humanity, and seeing people that I really resonated with just as individuals. I was like, oh, they're normal. Like, I could do what they do. And I'm still in touch with many of them today. Most of them are retired generals or full bird, like very high ranking people in the military. And it's just so humbling that I got to witness their journeys as young 18-year olds. But all that to say, yeah, West Point was pretty formative for me. And then went to my dad got stationed at the Pentagon after that. And then I ended up, my parents divorced towards the end of my high school experience, and I went to boarding school in England for a year. So at the time, the Department of Defense had one boarding school in the world, and it was in England. And I went there because my dad got stationed in Colombia at the embassy in Bogota. And this was right after the Pablo Escobar era. Actually, it was probably during it. But Colombia was incredibly dangerous. And they were like, you can stay here and maybe get kidnapped and killed, or you can go to England for a year. And I was like, senior year, England by myself? No brainer.
Your dad was in Colombia during that particular. They were blowing up airplanes, and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, crazy stuff.
Horrific, horrific stuff happening. Talk about the value of justice. I would hear stories of somebody walked into a court and dumped a trash bag full of severed heads in the middle in broad daylight, right? I remember the feeling of there is no justice here. Like people are doing their best to stop these cartels and literally we're losing this war. And it's the vulnerable that are being impacted. And actually that was the beginning of everything because
Mm.
seeing that I was like, I want to bust drug lords for a living and I wanted to be like my dad. And ultimately, long story short, I tried for many years. So I got on active duty and I was like, send me to Colombia, ready to go to South America. And things never worked out. The assignments person was like, nope, we have a volunteer. We're good. And I'm like, no, no, no. I speak Spanish. Like, I grew up in this space. I majored in Latin American studies and criminal justice at Penn State. Like, literally, I've been creating everything in my life to get me down there. And every door got slammed in my face, which was really demoralizing. And then fast forward, I accidentally become a special agent. I really didn't want to. I thought being an agent was like internal affairs.
When did
And
you first enroll in the Navy? Like, when did you officially make that decision? It was Navy.
I was the Air Force.
Air Force,
And
sorry. Yep.
yeah, I did ROTC because I couldn't afford college otherwise. And so I thought I wanted to go to West Point. Fate intervened. I ended up going to Penn State on an ROTC scholarship. And I wanted to be an intelligence officer. And I got personnel, which is human resources. And I literally ugly stomp bubble cried for 3 days. And in hindsight, I'm so thankful it happened that way because intelligence has been, first of all, intelligence work is not what I wanted to do. What I actually wanted was counterintelligence, but I didn't know it at the time. And the intelligence career field has been so undermanned since before 9/11 that they are not releasing anybody to become any other career field. And so nobody cared about human resources specialists. And so they're like, yeah, you can go be an agent, whatever, we don't need you. So it really, at the time, it was devastating for me, but it paved the way for so many things. So for those who are listening, if you're in a space where you're frustrated because all the doors keep getting slammed, trust me, it's leading you to somewhere amazing. Just keep going. But all that to say, I more breadcrumbs, right? So I actually had supervisors in human resources who would tell me that I would make a great special agent. And the little arrogant, I wasn't really arrogant, but I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not internal affairs. I don't like snitching on people. You don't know me, sir. And, but fate intervened. I wanted to get out of human resources and this was the only option for me. And so I very sarcastically to God was like, I'm going to put my package in. I don't think I'm going to get in, but if you want this to happen, then let's go. And 11 months later, I got a call. Hey, you're going to school in 2 weeks. Pack your stuff up, and the rest is kind of history. So
For special operations.
So it's actually called the Office of Special Investigations. So everybody knows NCIS is the Navy's version. So every other service has their own. So the Air Force is the Office of Special Investigations. Army has actually two. So it's Army Criminal Investigations Division, and then they have Army Counterintelligence. And then the Coast Guard has Coast Guard Intelligence Service. The Marine Corps has their own. Yeah. So everybody has their own, but that's what I ended up doing for the rest of my career.
So how grueling was that?
Grueling. I would not attribute the word grueling to the job. It was so much fun. It was amazing. It was a lot of hard days, you're working like a dog, without a doubt. But it was so much fun. And I think part of that was because I was aligned with my purpose of protecting the vulnerable.
Part of me thinks, Alani, there might be something a little wrong with you. I feel like like a switch in there or something that might have just gotten flipped the wrong direction. But
And that's super
I see
fair.
that like you have this joy in describing what are truly challenging, difficult, certainly grueling things, even from just working sex trafficking cases where I think I also might have that same switch that it got flipped in the wrong direction or whatever, because there's something very fulfilling for me about that proximity often to pain. And I think that even my journey with my son and his leukemia, and I lived in the hospital with him for 2 years, and there was something about that tapped into to who I am and what my calling is. And so that I think sometimes those things enable us to rise above, what especially some of the work that you've done is heartbreaking. There's just there's no real silver lining to that. It just is that. And
Absolutely.
And I know that living with those kids, and I know that from other aspects as a counselor of sitting with people in their pain. But that's part of your pain to purpose, I think.
But so I'm really glad you said that because I actually couldn't do what you do. So your career field, nurses, and aftercare providers, those are the three jobs I'm like, absolutely never. I would die. And I think the point is we're all wired for our specific purpose.
You're made for something. Yeah.
You're made for something. And I think the point is you honor that. And when you do, it's scary for all the reasons we already talked about. But when you take one tiny step towards it, like the path just reveals itself. And I'm not saying that there wasn't suffering
And maybe
through
who you
it.
are reveals itself as well, because we don't know. You don't know that. You discover yourself along the way.
Exactly. And you still discover. I think it's a
Yeah.
lifelong process. But no, I really want the listener to understand that you might hear my story and people are very gracious with their feedback. They're like, your resume is so impressive. I'm like, yeah, but your stuff is impressive. Homemakers, like people that stay home to take care of their kids, oh my gosh, I don't think I could do that, honestly. And I just think we each have our thing. And I think it's important not to take away, right? So often in society, we say, you have to do that. You have to volunteer to soup kitchen. You have to volunteer with the homeless. If that's not your thing, then don't do it. Find your thing. And
I would say that everybody has something in them that orients them towards service also. To me, there's a distinction there that, like, if your life purpose is just hosing everybody to make as much money as you possibly can, like, I don't know, like, you didn't discover yourself correctly. Like,
right.
I think that we were built for service and we were built to care for each other. And so I like, to me, hearing that in your story, and
Yeah.
certainly it's part of mine, but like your purpose should be about compassion, should be about how you
Right.
lift others up.
Right.
And so maybe there's better purposes than others, but
No, I totally agree with you. And even going back to our previous conversation about power, like all these cults. And by the way, I want to affirm for folks the rampant nature of child sex abuse and child sex trafficking in these organized religious spaces, in these cult spaces, they are real. I have seen them. I know the survivors. It is endemic in family units. That is the most common form of trafficking. This is happening everywhere all the time. But I think going back to purpose, the people in power that we were talking about, because their purpose isn't tied to service, they keep looking to fill that hole with more money and more power, right? But here you and I can talk about some depths of suffering with joy because we've done the work to understand these are my special set of gifts. This is who I think I want to offer it to. And you try something. If it doesn't work, you pivot until you find that thing that you're meant to do, right?
love
So
that idea of, if your purpose is out of alignment with maybe lifting people up, or some sense of generosity or compassion, then it's a purpose that drives something that's insatiable, and that's why it's never enough. It's never enough power. It's never enough money. It's never and whereas when you find somebody whose purpose is aligned with lifting up the vulnerable, like, you just see there's a contentment. There's a
so much contentment there. Yeah, there's a lot of suffering, but you learn how to manage it and you take time off. And actually, that's another really important point, I think, for your audience. Service so often is touted as you have to sacrifice everything. And if you're called to that, then do it. But the dark side of imposter syndrome, too, is that you will serve to prove that you matter, and you will deplete yourself to burnout, and you will blow your career up if you do it that way. And so the people that we generally cater to are not the people who have to hear, be more selfless, right? What your audience needs to hear more of is understand your worth and understand your value and love yourself and love your neighbor enough so that we can all get in this fight to stop the abuse of our fellow neighbors.
love that. Yeah, yeah, I love that. So, Alani, there's three kind of themes I always talk about on this podcast. One is leadership, one is mentorship, and the other is just mental health. And so, I'd like to, and I know also too, I wanted to ask you, I know there was you had a couple of Jonah moments, right, where you were called into areas of service where it was like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to do that, and those turned out to be areas where you found profound fulfillment. So, I want to circle around at least those three things as we talk about how you developed your sense of purpose and your sense of leadership, and who were your mentors, who were.
I love this question. Oh, so many mentors along the way. Obviously, my parents, first and foremost. And my, it might be easy to attribute where I am to my dad, but it was actually my mom that had the most influence on me. She was always the one who was telling me that I really had to focus on being excellent and living in integrity and teaching me those values and refining those character traits in me. And I like my parents, I'm so thankful they're my parents and I love them so much. I wasn't always the easiest kid to deal with, but
No, were
and
you bad? Were you a bad kid?
it's like you get to your teenage
Oh,
years and
yeah.
you think you know it all and stuff like that. And I certainly wasn't like the most angelic kid. I'll just say that much. Uh,
Whatever it's worth, I was a terrible kid.
yeah.
I regularly apologize to my parents for everything I
Dude,
said.
I'm always like, when I hear other parents that are struggling with their teens, I'm like, I just want you to know I'm apologizing on behalf of your kid. Like, they're going to come around. Don't worry. Like, you've done all the right things. You planted all the right seeds. No, I completely agree with you. But other mentors, I've had so many. Mr. Pick was my band teacher at West Point Elementary School. And he had these crazy lamb chops, like wore 70s clothes, like old balding guy, smelled like cigarettes, like the worst. But he was such an empathetic,
Mm.
kind soul. And he really saw me as a person. Like he taught me that I could pick up this instrument that I don't know how to play and I'm terrible at it the first day to I was playing in DC on some pretty big stages after my dad moved to the Pentagon. So having that soup to nuts, like that guidance of you can do a hard thing and you can be bad at something and you can get better if you choose. Mr. Pick was massive. Mrs. McClellan, my English teacher. And actually, I tried finding them for many years after, as an adult, had this realization of their impact on me because no kid really recognizes that
Knows
in
it
the
when it's
moment, right?
happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And I tried, like, I'm messaging the schools. I'm like, can you find Mr. Pig? Here's his picture. Never found him. But anytime I'd run into an educator, I'd always be like, I just want you to know you're having an impact, even if you don't know right now. You're amazing. And there were more than a couple educators that kind of had a cry moment because maybe they needed to hear that day. But that's what I try to share to honor the memory of those mentors of mine. And
So
then in the military,
off chance that they listen to this, maybe they stumble across it, what would you say to them?
I would say thank you so much for seeing little Alani, who felt so insignificant and ignored in the world, and showing me that I had value. Yeah, they were
I
amazing.
thought that was the to be seen that they saw you.
Yeah, it wasn't about fixing. It wasn't like, oh, Alani, you did bad in this. You have to, we're very achievement focused in the West,
Mm.
but it very much was life is to be played. And the band metaphor is so appropriate because you don't win at band, right? The point is you play for the sake of playing because it's an expressive thing and you do it by yourself or you do it with other people and then you collaborate and what beautiful music can you make together, right? So yeah, man, that was deep. I just had that you just brought that realization because I actually view a lot of my work in that same way now that we're talking about it. It's so you talked about finite games earlier. There's a book called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek.
Mm.
And he talks about the world usually will do binary games, right? So I have to win on the football field. I have to win with the job promotion, whatever. But when you evolve to an infinite game, right? So infinite games aren't meant to be won or lost, they're meant to be played. So in the anti-child exploitation space, I can't win that game because it's an unwinnable game, right?
Mm.
I'm never going to stop abusers from abusing. But the point is to play the game as long as I can. Infinite games are not limited to a finite number of players on each team. You can pick the number of players you want on your team and you can enter or exit as many people as you want, right? So as I'm playing the game, I identify who the best people are for the teams and we acquire new folks along the way, right? But the point is we're creating the solution the community needs. So all that to say,
So often you can harmonize disparate pieces and people that, and they can come around a mission in this like an orchestrated musical symphony, right? And you
exactly.
can do some beautiful things together.
That is exactly what it is. And when I think about the beauty, I used to focus on the operations results when I was younger, but the older I got, the more, despite the busyness of the ops and the pressure, I would always take 90 seconds to kind of look around and take a picture to be like, I created this. There are 100 people here because I offered to create a space so people could seek justice on behalf of kids. And
Wow.
all these people are sacrificing their time and they love their communities and they want to be part of the solution. And oh my gosh, I did this, right? It was just is crazy. It still makes me, it's pinch me kind of living. But yeah, so all that to say, it is about how well do I want to play the game of life? Not for me, but because I was created to love other people. But yeah.
So, same question. What would you say to your mom and dad?
Oh my gosh. I love you guys so much. And I'm so sorry for what a pain in the butt I was when I was younger. But you gave me everything. My parents gave me everything. Despite whatever struggles I thought I had, mom and dad gave me every opportunity, every tool. And I have a responsibility to use those to pay it forward for their sacrifices. So thank you, mom and dad. I love you guys so much.
Just thinking about them and your other mentors, because I'm so curious. I'm so curious about this fortitude I see in you, and this when the call comes and it's dangerous out there. Like you seem to be the kind of person who goes charging in that direction. And where do you think that came from? That willingness to put yourself out there?
Gosh, that is a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before.
Well, and just to add to that, though, because intellectually you can say, yeah, I'll die, yeah, I'll serve, yeah, I'll go do those things. But some people are uniquely propelled when the building's on fire, they run in, and you seem to have that both innately, but also have that, like, it's also very ethically driven as well.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I have a great answer. I think part of it is I was built that way, but I think also a motivator for me and for this campaign, frankly, is I didn't do everything in my career because I hated pedophiles or I hated traffickers or I hated terrorists. I did it because I love America.
You're called to serve, yeah.
Yeah, but it's because it's so easy, especially in these binary, whether it's political or otherwise conversations. It's we hate them. We hate the Republicans. We hate the Democrats. We hate whoever. We hate the rich. It's beyond that. It's what do you love? Because
Mm.
when you identify what you love, you will do anything for it. And I just think it's wild that trillions of people have existed over humanity. And yet here's Matt Leavenworth. There's never been a Matt ever. There never will be. And you were created for this moment to offer your gift. And for me, I just want to cut through the barriers so that Matt can shine as brightly as possible. And so I think the love for the mission is probably the right answer. And it's taken me time to hone that, right? It's easy for me to want to default and be like, I hate the administration or I hate Steve Daines or what, but that's just not true. I think everybody plays a part. And actually, I'm going to go biblical on you for a second, but I wrestled for a long time with Pharaoh in Moses's story, right? So Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelites go out of bondage. And I just remembered for years kind of being like, God, why would you do that? He was your child too, right? He was unique. Like, why would you do that? And I came to the understanding that one, I'm not God and I don't understand everything and I don't have to have an answer, right? But also the secondary understanding was that was Pharaoh's purpose was to be the no so that God's power could be shown through the no. And that is an incredible sacrifice on the part of Pharaoh's soul, which I know we're going to super woo territory. But the point is, translating it to my life and my why now, it's even the antagonists in our stories have a purpose. And the purpose is so that you can overcome and show people what's possible. And so that's why, even with the administration, like, I don't like what they're doing, but I know there's purpose. And I know on the other side of all of this nastiness in America, we're going to have a post World War II, like good versus evil thing happening. And you have to have evil in that story, unfortunately, but that's where we are. But it comes
But
back to the
it's an
love.
opportunity for redemption. Yeah, well, so
Exactly.
those were the two big questions, and then I want to make sure we talk about
Yeah,
your campaign a little bit as well.
sure.
But one was the question of faith and how that has oriented you, because I know that's a huge part of why you do what you do. How that's a source of strength, like what your faith means to you.
Yeah,
And the second one is I want to talk about mental health because that's especially for leaders, like how we stay strong, how we have stayed strong. Those
for
are
sure.
important things. But let's start with faith and what that means to you.
Oh man, yeah. Faith is everything to me. It's the cornerstone of who I am as a person. And I do want to preface by saying I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. I grew up in the church, but I left the church and deconstructed. There's a lot of, obviously, with Christian nationalism, what we're seeing right now. I'm very unhappy with that whole dialogue, but I left the church. I did my rebellious thing. I was like, I'm going to drink and I'm going to go to college. I'm going to have a good time and forget this church stuff. Right. But ultimately, I always felt like this little seed planted where it was like, you're going to come back to God at some point. And ultimately, where I found God really was this nasty, dingy hotel room on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, before my special ops deployment. I had met somebody who showed me so much unconditional love. I had told them like my worst secret, which honestly, like, really wasn't bad. But at the time, I thought it was like so awful. And they just loved me anyway. And that was the moment that I was like, oh, this is what true relationship with a higher power is. It's you're messy and you're lovable anyway. And
That moment of being seen in your brokenness, though, and loved regardless of it,
yes,
was a
yes,
transformational moment for you.
completely transformational. And there were roaches in that motel. It was nasty.
Who was the
But
person?
he was actually an ex-boyfriend of mine.
Yeah. But either way, he gave you that, and in that moment in time to be seen in all of
Right.
your broken pieces, and to know that love can even exist in those. Because that's imposter syndrome, right? If anybody finds out who I
Right.
actually am, they will run for the hills and reject me,
Exactly.
and we walk around with that
Exactly.
doubt and then to
Right.
actually be exposed and find out that you can be loved anyway is
Exactly. And so that's when the old religious framework of nobody did anything wrong, but I was raised in churches where it was like you have a to-do list to be a good Christian, and it wasn't about relationship. Again, intended, but I just felt othered in the church because I'm like, I feel like something's missing. And we weren't talking about relationship in the church in all the churches I went to growing up because it was all over the world, right? But then I started my journey of being like, okay, what does that mean to me? What does my spirituality mean to me? And it started with humanity, right? It was, I have a soul, you have a soul. And I made a decision that I believe that all souls were connected and that there was some higher power. That was my choice, right? I'm not saying other people have to believe that, but I once heard Father Richard Rohr on a podcast talk about faith is the opposite of certainty, which is obvious. It's obvious, but that one blew my world open because I was like, what? This is so true because you don't have evidence that God exists, but you have to make a choice whether you want to believe that God exists or not. And frankly, I had seen too many instances of not supernatural things, but just weird things happening in my life. And I'll give you an example. There's been different kind of Bible verses that have cemented different seasons of my life. And when I was at the Pentagon, so I was a senior bodyguard. Remember, I didn't want to be there, right? I'm a justice seeker for the vulnerable, and I was like, why am I taking a bullet for rich, powerful people? This is not my jam. And it was even longer hours than doing counterintelligence in Kuwait, if you can believe it. I was maybe sleeping 3 hours a night. And I remember there were several times where I was just really resentful to God. And I'm like, why am I here? This is so dumb. And Isaiah 6:8 kept popping up like right in that moment when I wanted to quit. And so Isaiah 6:8 says, whom shall I send and who will go for me? Here am I, send me. And the two instances, one was we went to the Air Force Special Operations Training Academy. Again, super burned out. Speaking of mental health, I was exhausted. And I could just feel God was like, do you trust me? And I was like, fine, I trust you. Like, I'm a fiery person, right? And we walk into this training hall and this verse is there. Now, keep in mind, it's a military building. You're not supposed to like enmesh religion
Yeah.
with government stuff, but this is a warrior ethos, right? So it's massive just in my face. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then the second time was the river entrance of the Pentagon is the main distinguished visitor entrance. So the Secretary of Defense, all the secretaries walk through that entrance. And I was about a year in when I realized I'd been walking past this massive mural of a family praying in the Air Force Academy chapel. And
Mm.
underneath it was Isaiah 6:8. And it
Mm.
was another like moment of brokenness where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. And it was God again saying, do you trust me? So fast forward, I leave active duty after that job.
Do you trust me? And you're called, and it's you.
And I was called.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
hey, somebody's got to go. Will you go? And I was like, yes, I'll go. And I'll
Mhm.
admit, I was resentful about it because I was like, I don't want to be here. I'm tired. I just did a year in Kuwait and I don't
Mm.
understand this. But God was like, I have a plan. Will you trust me? Will you go for me? And I was like, okay, I'm in. And fast forward, I leave active duty. I go to this international nonprofit, anti slavery nonprofit. 3 months after I get hired, my boss calls me into his office. He was the former NCIS director. He was the vice president of investigations for this massive international organization. Amazing, amazing human. And he says, hey, some of our staff and a client at our Kenya office were murdered by the Kenyan National Police.
Mm.
You're one of two bodyguard trained people in the entire organization. Would you go to Kenya and do protection missions to and from court for this international high profile corruption case? By the way, one of the police officers is still at large that was responsible for the murders. We don't even know their identity. We're a nonprofit, so you get no badge, no gun, no authority. We don't have budget for a bulletproof vest. Will you go? And I was like, hell yes. Like, I was like, but in that moment, I was like, oh,
Mm.
that was all preparation for me to protect these people who are truly going after corrupt government officials that operate with impunity against those seeking justice. I was like, oh, yes, I'm here to protect them. So I've had a lot of moments like that where it's like, just there's no other way to explain it other than some kind of divine hand over my life.
And I know that story because I listened to your podcast, which is fantastic as well.
Oh,
And
thanks.
the humble warrior, right? Yeah.
Humble Warrior podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, anybody listening, please check
Thanks.
that out. It's so good. But you told that story, and this is literally there are people testifying this horrible corruption and abuse, and it was law enforcement who had really committed these crimes, and so
Yep.
the people testifying in court were like massively at risk to be terminated
Yep.
by literally law enforcement, and that was your job to go in there with no funding, no equipment, and try to protect these people who were also then. But again, it's standing up for some. These are people who are standing up for something that is bigger than they are and putting everything on the line to do that. And that was your job is to protect them.
Yeah. And so in the context of everything you know about me now, right? I feel called to protect the vulnerable. I hate bullies. I've known this since I was a kid. And now I get the world's best training in personal protection
Mm.
so that I can go protect people that have no money, no resources, and are seeking justice against some of the most corrupt people on the planet. It still blows my mind, and it's been 10 years.
It feels like that was a, I don't know, a recognition of your calling, or like it was one of those
Oh,
moments
yeah.
of convergence and intersection.
Yeah.
What you
Yeah.
were made, what God put you on this planet for was.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I could literally see every job I ever had, how it led me there. And that moment, I was like, I'm sorry, God, for whining. And I was like, I won't fight you again. That actually turned out not to be true. Of course, I had my Jonah moments since then. But that was when I was like, oh, like everything has a purpose and I'm here for it.
Let's talk a little bit about pain to purpose, right? That
Mhm.
implies pain, and mental health is a big part of what I do, what my background, and you've had to stand strong for a lot of people, a lot of times in very, very difficult situations. And can you talk a little bit about your mental health journey and
Oh, yeah.
how you've managed to show up for people when they need it?
Yeah, yeah, no, totally happy to. And I know this is a very taboo subject for a lot of people, but with your job and us being able to have these conversations. I appreciate the question because we do really need to break down the walls around mental health and the stigma of asking for help. And this is funny because when people talk about what dirt do you have on your life, I'm like, oh, I've already put it all out there. It's in my book, it's in my podcast. I talk about this stuff openly. But yeah, mental health, obviously, massive problem in law enforcement and the military. I am diagnosed PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, depression. I have night terrors. Alcohol and child exploitation cases do not mix. So I actually haven't had a drink in almost 4 years because I had to learn the hard way that it's not conducive, and it's built into our community, right? It's work hard, play hard. I'm not saying alcohol is not a bad thing. It's just for me, I had to not do that anymore.
Well, maybe as a coping skill for alcohol is a coping skill, like for that level of
Absolutely.
darkness that you were living inside of. If that's a coping skill, and that's a really dangerous one to have.
Super dangerous one. And we would do it together, right? The teams, like, it's just ritual. Like, you finish an op, you go out for some greasy food at 2 a.m. and you have a bunch of beers, and you numb out the pain of the horrific stuff you saw that day or that weekend. And so yeah, it became a pattern, unfortunately, that I had to do a lot of work to undo. And I had mentors and support in that space. And I will never go back, man. I'm just so thankful for that journey. I'm also thankful to that version of me that was so willing to give it all for the mission. And I just didn't have the tools to manage with the struggles of, and not just looking at child sex abuse material, having conversations with, because I've done thousands of undercover chats with pedophiles and traffickers, dealing with the cases, dealing with the politics, dealing with corrupt politicians or corrupt government officials that want to stop you from doing what you do. Yes, it's a thing. But ultimately, the other thing I mentioned, that folks burn out at 2 years. If I can keep them 2 years, it's a miracle. And so I would burn out. I had phases of burning out, and then I'd get out for a little bit and then get called back into it. And the last time I left, I was in a really dark hole for a couple of years. A lot of therapy. I got EMDR, which is an amazing tool. I get a lot of support from the VA, and I am so thankful for those resources. Again, a testament to how much the American people love their military and their law enforcement. And this last time, actually, I thought I'd kind of like, I overdid it. I really was in a really awful mental space. And frankly, I thought that I lost out on that time. I wanted to heal so bad so I could get back to the work. But something told me I had to sit in that pit for a while, and I had to really undo a lot of stuff, right? So I finally had to let go of the behavior of trying to demonstrate that I was valuable by doing work. That was my imposter syndrome. I feel like I don't matter because people tell me I don't matter. So if I work and I can prove
Achieve more.
myself, right, then people will value me. And I finally had to let that go and be like, no, I'm valued because I'm a human that exists, right? But I'm so thankful for that time. And there's a Bible verse, I want to say it's Hosea, that says, I will restore what the locusts have eaten. And that one presented to me closer to the end of that healing journey of, as you think that you lost all this time, time is a man-made construct. I'm going to restore everything you thought you lost and then some. And I think that's ultimately one of the things that brought me to the campaign is, Alani, you can't burn yourself out, because if you're out of the fight, you're not good to anybody. Right. And so I think for the mental health portion of the conversation, that's something that I had to learn. And that's something that I teach to other justice seekers now, too. It's, hey, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, you love, you will pour yourself out empty. And that's the ultimate struggle for a justice seeker, is there's so much injustice that you could completely burn yourself to a crisp, and there's still evil happening throughout the world. But I've learned much better how to pace myself. Even with the campaign, I have to prioritize, like, my self-care is the number one thing, because this is a long game that we're playing. It doesn't stop at the campaign. If I win, the real work starts on Capitol Hill. And that's harder because I've seen how it goes up there. So mental health is absolutely the name of the game. I preach it for myself and for the team, my amazing campaign staff. So yeah, and it's a crisis. Mental health is the reason why we have so many child exploitation cases. Mental health is the reason why we have insider threat terrorism. Mental health is the reason why we have so much alcoholism. Montana's #1 in the country, right, for alcoholism. Drug use, right? There's all this rhetoric around immigrants bringing drugs. I'm like, this is supply and demand, guys. If we address the mental health issues that resulted in people wanting drugs to where they didn't need drugs, we wouldn't have a supply.
Yeah. And I just hear in the back, even as that's what this podcast probably is really about, is our call to action for those people who are listening, for those people who interact with you on your campaign to rise up and take some power back and find their purpose. And so there's a leadership aspect to that question of because we need our leaders to stay strong because we need you right now,
Right.
Alani, and you're stepping into that battlefield. And so we need you to stay strong. But for anybody, we're calling to go take that risk, to go face what they're afraid of and stand up right now. We have to take care of each other and we have to take care of ourselves and we have to lift each other up. And it seems to me that we also have to be honest about who we are, what we're going through, those sleepless nights. And I've got all of those diagnoses as well. And I can say that with empathy towards myself and empathy towards other people, but also it's not an excuse as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And when the time comes for us to show up, I'm going to be there.
Yeah, no, same with me. And I love what you said. And going back to take action, right? Getting sober is being in the fight. And I tell people that all the time. I'm like, man, like whatever your battle is, to your point, right? Whatever the thing is you're afraid to face, that's where the magic is waiting for you. And not drinking has amplified my life so much. When people are like, do you miss it? I'm like, hell no. My life is infinitely better now on so many levels. I connect better with myself and with people around me. And yeah, like that might be your contribution to the fight, right? Is I'm not going to buy drugs. I'm not going to drink tonight. I'm not like, maybe cold turkey isn't the way to go, but working up, it's a process to heal from these things, right? But that's just as powerful as Alani running for US Senate, without a doubt.
You're blazing a trail towards healing. Like you're taking your
Right.
life and turning it in to a path of healing, and that
Right.
that illuminates, right? Then people
Yeah.
around you get to watch you heal and watch you take back your world and step up and take better care of your kids and your family,
Yeah.
and that just it emanates, right? Like that it
Yeah.
multiplies. And so that is a form of leadership and it's a form of purpose, and that's the one that's right in front of you. And of course you're
Right.
afraid of it, right? Getting sober is so hard, right? Because
Yep.
that's the thing that you've been using to prop your world up, and you take that crutch out and you're pretty sure you're going to fall. And
Yeah.
and you can be a testament to the fact that you can find your purpose instead. And
100%. 100%. Yeah. And you actually just reminded me of, we had the big Democratic gala, the Mansfield Metcalf gala this past weekend. And I gave my talk, and so many people came up to me, survivors of child sex abuse, parents of convicted abusers, and everybody wants solutions and everybody wants healing. And this one poor mother was just crying to me. And she's, my son's in jail for this. And what do I do? What can I do to help him afterwards? And it goes all back to mental health, what you're saying. If he had addressed his porn addiction when he did, probably wouldn't be in jail. And when I was talking about us putting guys on the polygraph machine after we arrest them, the ones that hadn't touched kids, I'd be saying, this is your wake up call from the universe. Go get some therapy. And I believe that that was the intervention tool designed for that moment for that person. And I would tell them, I'm like, this is not the end of your story. Society stigmatizes that crime, and it's a horrific crime, but we contribute to it as a society because we guilt and shame anybody who says, I have a problem and I want help. Immediately, you're an evil person. And that's part of my journey. And I know it might be unpopular with some people, but I'm like, can we just address the root cause so that people aren't hurt down the road and people can get help when they need it? So I so appreciate your perspective on that and our ability to talk openly about what our experiences are like. And I honestly hope that men can do it on a bigger scale when it comes to different addictions that pop up for them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm loving this theme that we're pulling out of people rising up and taking, and how that aligns with also stepping up for our country right now and getting involved. Because some of the other things you can do while you're getting sober is maybe go support one of our candidates. That
Yeah.
we got some really awful people in leadership right now, and we need to get rid of them, and we need to put
Yeah.
people in their place that are willing to rebuild accountability. Danes and obviously pulled this little Houdini trick at the end, and it's just so anti-democratic. But also, like every time Trump says jump, that guy is just like how high. He is just a lapdog as far as I can tell. And Penny will get mad at me because I really dog on Danes sometimes. And I think probably he's a decent human being, but he is so complicit in the crimes that are taken. And these are just crimes at international level. They're crimes. So we can do a couple things at once. We can support our candidates who are standing up right now in our country's moment of need, and then also take some power back in our own lives. And so this is a call to action in a lot of different directions. And so I want to talk about your campaign and wanted to maybe share a couple of things just briefly, and then just let you talk about what your campaign life is like and what you're running for, and I think we can end there. But two things. One is Senator Mike Yakowicz. He's a state senator here in Billings, and he's just one of my best friends, one of my mentors. And him and I have been talking about some legislation that can be passed. This is state legislation, but apparently there's a mechanism where if you can require porn producers to check people's ages, then they'll just pull out, right? So if you mandate by law that they have to verify your age before you can access their website, then because they can't do that, and it's so much of a liability on their end. So they're just like Pornhub and all of these massive just distributors, they'll just pull out of your state. And right now the average age of exposure is 8 years old to pornographic material. So your 8-year-old is probably going to see people having anal sex, or people, or threesomes, or fivesums, or these things that children should never have to see. And that's because of just the enormous levels of exposure and all of this stuff. The most popular form of pornography is teen pornography. It's the most commonly searched for. And these things are so problematic and so a component of. But anyway, that's something Mike and I are looking at. So that would be a wonderful solution if we could figure out some ways that our 8-year-old children are not exposed to that at such an early age. And all that stuff is complex, but anyway, that's one of the things in the background. And also just to draw this conversation back to Montana, I was talking to our mutual friend, Leah Bossler, and she shared this story, and that's how actually you and I, and she gave me permission to share this story. But that's how you and I connected. She got us in contact with each other. So much gratitude for her. But shared the story of she was a firefighter, a wildlands firefighter, and was passing through Billings, returning from an assignment. And they stayed in a hotel, and she was with her fire crew. So this is just one of the wildest stories I've ever heard. And she was with one of the other firemen, and they went to the bar at this hotel in Billings, and she was roofied. And there were these men that were outside the hotel, and they were dressed as golfers, and so they had golf equipment. And they were lurking around, and that's what they said. But as far as I can tell, she was probably roofied by the bar based on how she described this story. And the guy she was with was also roofied, and so he collapsed somewhere else, and she wound up running for her life, and was just describing this horrifying story of hiding in the bushes, and these guys are coming around and they're talking about how they can't lose her, like she's exactly the kind of person that their boss is looking for. And finally makes it back to her hotel room, and then passes out and wakes up the next day. But they were unquestionably attempting to abduct her. And then she's from Missoula, drove back to Missoula, and then her and her colleague both had the exact same account, and tried to call local authorities here and just got no response. They wouldn't investigate it. They said, you're not in Billings, so we can't really follow up on this, and just got no response. And I say this with the last person I interviewed here is a law enforcement officer. And man, we have some phenomenal law enforcement officers. So I do not want this to sound critical for law, but we got people with it. It's not a huge budget, and there's a lot of people doing the best they can out there to fight a lot, because we got gangs and we have suicides and we have every other thing that you can imagine. Billings is a tough city. But I know that this particular crime is one that my city has really struggled to enforce. And then to hear that story from Leah is heartbreaking. And she also told me that later on in the following years, three women, and she said she looks a Native American, so 3 women who were Native American were abducted from that location and never seen or heard from again. And so these are real issues in our state. They're real, and I know that's part of your platform, and So just even to kind of share that story, even my conversations with Penny, I do a ton of work here in Billings. So I work on the problem with gangs and but also human trafficking. And so just we all have to step up. We all have some responsibility in this. And so anyway, just that these things are going on right here, right now. And so this isn't just about holding Trump accountable. This is also about we have problems right here in our state, and you're going to be our representative. I'm looking forward to that day.
God willing.
But as a transition there, but talk about your campaign and
Yeah.
what you're running for and how you got there, how the whale spit you out on this particular shoreline.
Yeah, no. Before I answer that, Leah's a total badass. And she is one that, to your earlier point, she's doing something. She's doing something by sharing her story. She's doing something by actively connecting folks, right? She connected us today to amplify these stories and this mission.
And it's
She's doing
fighting for
other
Russ
stuff.
too. And I've got a pitch because Russ is the
Of
first person
course.
that he was the whale that ate me and spit me out. And
Of
he's just a
course.
phenomenal candidate.
Of course.
He's one of the best I've ever seen. And so she's also endorsing him and
Right. Right.
fighting for him and also
Yeah.
connecting us. And there's so many exciting things about this, right? Like even this
Yes.
connection and the connection with Russ, like if we can come together, if we can share our platforms, if we can promote
Yep.
the leaders who are, man, because we've got some really good ones out there. And it's not easy to know how to break through the stranglehold of hate and fear. But
Right.
we're gonna
Right.
give it we're gonna give it a go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is all about the connections, right? And what you do with the tools that you have at your disposal. There's a David Goggins quote I really love, and I'm going to butcher it. But so David Goggins is like this Navy SEAL, like inspirational guy, right? And he says something to the effect of, for every 100 guys on the battlefield, 10 are completely worthless. They shouldn't even be there, or they're working against you. 80, they're doing okay. They're there, they're volleying with the bad guys, whatever. It's really only the top 10 that get the mission pushed to completion. And it's only really the one that facilitates that magic. And what we're talking about is the 10 that choose to be part of the solution. Because not everybody has courage to do it. I get a lot of messages from people where they're like, I think I saw trafficking, but I'm scared to report it because what if I lose my job? And I'm like, then don't. That's on your conscience, right? Like this is your life. You get to dictate how courageous you choose to be or not to be. And I actually don't even judge them for it because some people are genuinely scared. But it's all about the 10, as I call it, finding each other. Because when you can find a Matt or a Leah or a Russ, all of a sudden you're like, we can do this. We're not exactly sure how, but we can do this. And I know that there are people listening that have felt out of place in their communities. They're like, I don't understand. Like, how do you not see that we need to do A, B, and C to create the solution? That's because you're the visionary. That's your mission. That's your purpose. And those other folks have a different purpose. The challenge for you as one of the 10 is helping translate the vision to where people can see it, accept it, understand it. And that takes time. The successes I had professionally were not because everybody jumped on board. In fact, most of the time, there was a lot of opposition. In one jurisdiction I worked in, I had a very famous 3-letter agency and an assistant U.S. attorney fighting me to protect kids. And then the first person we arrested was a retired cop. Oh, they were all about it after that. As soon as the results came in and they wanted to bandwagon on the press release, they were all about it. But there's always going to be opposition, especially when you're shining brightly and other people are too scared to shine their own light. They're going to want to dim yours. So all that to say, that's what the campaign's about. I've built coalitions my whole career. I'm so thankful for every candidate in this race, whether they're in my party or not, because they're saying, I want to be part of the solution. And it's just that the difference between me and them is I have results in DC and elsewhere in building these coalitions, in getting the results. I have trusted relationships with people that I would bet my life on, frankly. And it's really crazy, again, with the breadcrumbs. And I'll give you a great example of this, but there's a guy, I was a baby agent on the terrorism desk in Quantico. He was a baby intelligence analyst. He's now the senior intelligence analyst. I haven't talked to him in some years because we just lost touch, but somehow we got reconnected recently. And we're talking and he's, oh, where do you live now? tell him I'm in Helena. I'm from Butte.
Mm.
And I'm just like, how did I not know? Or I must have forgotten. It was almost 2 decades ago, right? But I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's from Butte. And he's a Montana boy, but he's at the top of the national security field in DC looking for a promotion, and working on Capitol Hill would be a promotion. And I'm just like, this is a no-brainer. This is a good human with all the skill set. He's a Montana boy. I'm just like, oh my. But there's all those things happening around the campaign right now. And so if someone's listening and they feel called to be part of the campaign, please, by all means, it literally is. I'm just saying, I'm going to build this thing. Who wants to play? And what gift do you want to offer? And I will cut the red tape to create the thing that your community needs. But the campaign is focused on accountability, protecting the vulnerable, affordability, public lands, agriculture, and education. So those are my 6 big platform items. And it all comes back to Montana mattering. So the campaign slogan is Montana Matters, because we want every Montanan to know that they have value. And again, Montanan leadership culture is unlike any in the world. And that's what I want to take to DC. And it's just a matter of we're getting the message out, having amazing conversations like these. We have a podcast launching actually later today. It's called the Montana Matters Podcast. I have this incredible Helena native, Stella Durant. She's a college student right now. She's producing the podcast. If you like my energy, oh my gosh, this girl is, I have so much hope for America and our future because of young people like her. But the campaign is born out of love. I really just want people to feel loved and seen and that someone's got their back. And it's up to the people of Montana to decide who they want to represent them. And because of Hatch Act and UCMJ, government employees can't speak out about the administration. But I got a lot of notes in my inbox from people who were like, yo, come back here. We're ready for you to come back so we can clean house. And these are now very high ranking people that have good hearts, that have been getting work done. It's just you don't hear about it because all you hear about is the bad stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a movement happening, I think, in the military and in federal government and state governments as well, where people are ready to reclaim our identity as a moral country and state and say, we're not putting up with this anymore. But it's okay. You got to build it with us.
Feel that rumbling of energy, isn't it? It's there.
Totally. It's like you can cut it, man. It's so thick in the air. And I'm excited for it. I think America is going to come out so much stronger. A podcast I like back when I was hopeless in my mental health struggle, John Meacham's Hope Through History was a source of light for me. So he talks about all the he's a historian, a big famous historian, but all the seasons in America's history where we almost broke as a democracy. So what we're experiencing now is not new for us. And if you go back and listen to that podcast, you will hear how we got through. And we need to share these stories to the point of your whole platform so that we can encourage and inspire each other, because I have my hard moments and you have your hard moments. And that's when we support each other and we get through this garbage that's happening right now.
So we can get back up there as leaders and be a voice of hope, because it's there. It's there.
Yeah.
But I love that. What final thoughts on your campaign? Anything else that you want to talk about or address? Or
I think I just, again, want to reiterate that every Montanan matters. Party politics aside, this is not about red versus blue. This is about top versus bottom. This is about evil versus good. And I'm not trying to make it like a whole like religious thing, but truly, if you are a person we're all flawed, we all have our things and our backgrounds. But if you care about your community and you care about your family and people around you, then you're called to serve in some capacity and you have a choice on how you want to do that. And I've been told by different political experts that the eastern counties, for example, they're like, don't even bother. They don't move the needle. But that's not the point of the campaign. The point is every Montanan matters. So we're going to go to every corner and visit with everybody. And
we're mobilizing out here. You come to Billings, I'll throw you a party.
Oh, I'm super stoked to come out. I love Billings. Every time I go out there, I just have the best time. But yeah, ultimately though, the power is yours, listener, on how you want your state and your country to be. Another quick data point I'll give: when people say, "Oh, but it's just my vote. My vote isn't really that important." There is a reason why the Tester Sheehy campaign raised $180 million. And it's not because you don't matter. Because people don't give money if it if it's not important, they're not going to invest that amount of money into it. They're literally trying to buy their way into office. And the only people who can stop it is you. And they know that.
Well, I love that as well. And I also think if we can recognize our power, our capacity to influence change, because there's some common issues that all of us are asking for. It's like almost universal. We're really tired of candidates running off dark money. Like
Right.
everybody says that. We're really tired of a total lack of accountability for our leaders. We're tired of corruption.
Right.
Everybody agrees on that. And so now at this particular moment in time, we have that opportunity. We have to seize that. We have to find people
100%.
like you, Alani. We have to find people like Russ, and we have to elevate you. Like it's our job too.
Yeah. No, and I'm so glad and thankful that you said that, Matt, because like Russ, I'm not taking
Mm.
PAC money. I'm not taking APAC money. I'm not taking special interest money. And what that means is this is a grassroots campaign. And grassroots dollars, I'm thankful for every dollar, but it's not millions. And so I would encourage anybody listening, if you say you don't want dark money in politics and you haven't donated, if you're able to, right? And you haven't donated to a campaign that you believe in, please, please donate. Even if I'm not your preferred person. But these campaigns cost money. It costs money to get into, I think Montana is the fourth biggest like congressional territory in the
Mm.
country. And it's difficult. It's not like Texas where you got highways everywhere. Like we have passes that might be snowed over and it's hard to get around the state, especially in the wintertime. But the point is I will admit sometimes I get a little bit frustrated because people are like, "Oh, it's so great that you're not taking any money," and then they don't donate. And I'm like, are you hyped about it or not? Because
Um,
I have to pay my staff more than anything deserve to be paid because they're doing incredible work too. And so I agree with you 100%. And it goes back to our responsibility, right? And I've had neighbors so kind say, I want to host a fundraiser, but it might be small. I'm like, literally every dollar I am so thankful for. But again, they have that imposter voice saying, your fundraiser isn't good enough. And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm like, no, it's not even just about the fundraiser. Money is energy. And you're saying, I'm willing to invest because I believe in you as a candidate. And that is powerful. If you're a survivor, or if you're angry about what's happening with the administration, I say rage with your dollar. But the point is just do what you can, whatever you feel called to. If you do your part and they do their part, we're going to get through this
yeah.
and then some. And I really believe in the human spirit and the spirit of Montana and America. We're going to be fine because of people like you, Matt. So
We make them tough out here.
yeah, for sure.
Lonnie, and this is an invitation, a proposal to you, to any of our candidates who are rising up right now and trying to change how business is done. Because to me, there are just so many of these voices. And also my background work, I build coalitions, built a number of them out here. One is the Suicide Prevention Coalition. My co-chair, the chair, Sarah Music, her and I built that from, it was like 20 people when we took over, and we had a conference of like almost 300 by the time.
Incredible.
And it was
Incredible.
about suicide prevention, and we had hard conversations. And recently we started working on mentor recruitment, so it's the mentoring work group, and we've brought all of our nonprofits, so Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Boy Scouts, like all of these different organizations that are all caring for young people. We brought them together, and we're just going to blow up mentoring. Like we're just going to harness the energy of our community and make sure kids get people who care about them, because that actually is this incredible research by the Justice Department. I mean, it looked at kids who were in the criminal justice system, had high ACE scores, and the ones who got out versus the ones who stayed in, and the ones who got out could all cite one person in their life that believed in them and saw them. And it could have been a teacher, a counselor, a mentor, but it was one person who saw them, like what you described earlier. And
Yeah.
and that seems to be like when people see us in our broken pieces and believe in us
Yeah.
anyway. And there's a lot of hungry kids who just need that. And so those are the types of
Yeah.
problems that Payload for my nonprofit. Like we look at those collective impact type problems and figure out innovative ways to solve them. And that is, as Russ pulled me into this terrain that I had zero interest in getting involved in, that's what's starting to take over, and where I think I can really, really support candidates like you, but is to build a coalition. And like what we're proposing now, I don't know how many people have done that, but released a podcast on two different services. So it's going to be it's going to be the Humble Warrior podcast and the Payload Forward podcast. And so we're doubling our reach and we're doubling our capacity for impact. And we're also telling, I'm so intent on this. This is a 3-hour podcast. We're about at 3 hours right now. And to me, that is so essential because our voters need to know our leaders, right? But know you in a real way. Hopefully, I've asked you good enough questions, hard enough questions that people can get a sense of really who you are, not just your talking points, not the PowerPoint you're going to show at your next presentation, but who you are, what makes you tick, what makes your heart beat, what gets you out of bed in the morning. And we owe that to our Montanans to tell those stories, the whole story, right?
Oh man, I love that so much. And I just want to think out loud because I want people to understand how my thought process works with this stuff. But just hearing you talk, I'm like, oh, we could do so much stuff, right? It's like I get to DC, we could set up a program where your kids are coming to DC and getting mentored by the brightest in government, whatever, right? There are different nonprofits that I know of that can provide funding for that kind of stuff, right? And it's funny when I talk to Montanans, our neighbors, about some of these ideas, they're like, we're allowed to do that? I'm like, yes. Not only are we allowed to do that, but one of the points of me becoming a legislator is because I know we can create whatever laws we want. We can make whatever policy we think our communities need. And I'm sure for you, your 300-person conference, that's scary, right? It's stressful. It's, oh man, all these people are spending their time and money on us because they see the value that we bring, right? But the point is to empower people with different ideas and collaborations and coalition building like what you do. That's where the fun and the magic happens. And the hardest part is we do these things knowing that we're probably never going to see the fruit that they bear. Mr. Pick never heard from Alani directly, the impact that he had on me. And when I do talks on my child exploitation work, because I want people to shift from purely intellectual to the intuitive space, I'll ask, how many of you believe that I've stopped kids from being abused? And everybody raises their hands, right? And I ask, what evidence do you have that's true? And the answer is none. We don't have any evidence. And I'm like, that's what spirituality is to me. Your intuition tells you because you did X work, this is the result that you will never have data for. And that's the hard part with the mental health support, right? That we need to have those tools in the toolbox to have that strong faith to know if Matt's doing this work with these kids, the fruit's coming over here and it's going to be magnificent and I'm never going to see it. And that's also why we have to encourage each other in those spaces. We got an email after an op I did. It was publicized and a survivor sent this note and they said, you don't know me, but I was recovered during an op like this 10 years ago. I was trafficked. I knew at the time the person I was talking to was an undercover, but I was too traumatized to say anything. Can you please let Detective John Smith know that I'm okay, I'm clean, I'm sober, I have a family, I have had a job, and my life is so much better because of what he did back then. And we tried to find him, but he had such a common name, like we couldn't find the records. But I show that at every operations safety briefing I have to say, this is what you're doing today. And we have proof of what this guy did 10 years ago. Imagine what we're doing this weekend with better tools and better personnel, right? And more numbers. So thank you, Matt, for your incredible work. And thank you so much for giving me space on this podcast to collaborate with you. And unfortunately for you, that means you're stuck with me.
Oh, no. Yeah. I was gonna warn you about the same thing. I think Russ is having his second thoughts like this guy's crazy.
No, thank you. And folks, if you're listening and you're inspired, like Matt just invited me to a conversation with a mic. And I'm inspired. And so you've given me energy to continue on the campaign trail because it's hard, but Montana's worth it.
My mission, I'm going to go find our authentic leaders and I'm going to give them a platform and then I'm going to connect them together and we're going to build a coalition of people who have had enough and take this world back. And I'm on a mission right now, Alani, and I know you are too.
I'm stoked. Thank you so much, brother. This has been incredible.
That's so fun. Thank you.